June dance, so anybody who comes in, pulls anything, we gotta find out right away.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the February 24th, 2020, 5:30 meeting of the Board of Selectmen, Highway Commissioners, Cemetery Commissioners. First order of business is rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Greetings, everyone. We're going to, before we start the CMRPC Central Mass Regional Planning Commission listening session, with the board's pleasure, I would like to amend the agenda and take the representative for Dudley Little League out of order so he can make his presentation. Without objection.
Evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I'm here to request the board's approval to hold a voluntary toll booth on Saturday, April 18th, with a rain date of, I'd like to amend that to be April 25th, the following Saturday, if I could.
And you are?
I am Dan Colella, president of Dudley Little League.
Good evening, Dan. So you want to change the toll booth rain date to the 25th as opposed to the 19th?
Yes.
Michelle, how does that line up with
That's fine.
either date
You're the
tonight?
first one.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant?
Chief,
You know the way it's set up, you gotta go through our office and the chief will tell you how to line up your people. So make sure if you don't get to the chief before the 18th, you can't have it.
Okay.
All right. 9 to noon, right, those are the set hours. All good, Mr. Administrator?
Sounds good.
Chair will entertain a motion to grant permission for the toll booth on Saturday, April 18th, 2020, 9 to noon.
so moved.
Moved by Mr. Johnson,
Second.
second by Sigenovich. Any further questions or concerns? Hearing none, all in favor state aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Next up, the parade.
I would like to hold the Dudley Little League parade as stated on the agenda.
So he's looking for permission to hold the parade May 2nd, 2020, with a rain date of May 9th, and that would be at what time, 11 usually?
It would leave the town hall at noon.
At noon.
See the Crawford Field from here.
Again, you just have to get together with the chiefs. Sometimes fire and EMS shows up too, so you might want to touch base with him. They might send the truck down. I know, I just said touch base with you. Thank you, chief. Thank you, chief. Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Chairman, just be careful if you have someone throw out the first pitch. A couple of selectmen can't quite meet the requirements.
One did not.
One for sure.
I hit a strike. I've got it on video if you'd like to see it after,
halfway though,
Mr.
right?
Johnson.
He was halfway.
No, I wasn't. I took my jacket off and I
At least wait
nailed
for him
it.
to be here before you tool on him and let us all enjoy it.
I might not get it in later.
You might want to reconsider.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Oh, it's not-
It's like a debate stage. Any further questions for the applicant? Hearing none. All in favor to grant the request of May 2nd, 2020 at noon?
We need a motion, Mr. Chairman.
I thought it was just
So
unanimous
moved. So
consent. Unanimous consent. No, I'm just kidding. All in favor state aye.
Aye.
All right,
Unanimous. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
that was easy, right?
Calling everybody out for the
Any
pictures.
minutes on this?
Jonathan, go right back to CMRPC.
Do we have any minutes?
We do.
And do the
Can we
minutes
just
first.
can we do 3? And then we'll go right to CMRPC?
We're going to just take care of our minutes real quick before we turn over the presentation. So Chair will entertain a motion to accept the amended minutes from January 27, 2020.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Sigenovich, second by Mr. Johnson. Any further questions or corrections? Hearing none, all in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Chair will entertain the motion to approve the minutes as presented, February 10th, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further questions or concerns? Hearing none, all in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Unanimous.
Thank you.
At this time, we will call up the representative, excuse me, from Central Mass Regional Planning Commission for a listening session. Sir.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the board.
Good evening.
For the record, my name is Peter Pelquin. I'm an associate planner with Central Mass Regional Planning Commission. And I'm here tonight to give the board and the public as well an overview of the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program that the town's gone through. They held a workshop back in January. We're going to give an overview of how we got there, what we did during the day, during that 8-hour workshop, and some of the things that we found. Kind of a highlight / overview of what happened throughout that day. If at any point anybody has any questions, feel free to interrupt. This is a rather lengthy presentation. I'll probably be talking for about 20 minutes or so, so feel free to interrupt at any time.
I'm going to interrupt, Mr. Chairman.
Mr.
Would it be helpful, Peter, if you sat here and we just put your laptop in case there are any questions from that line?
Say again?
If you had any questions from the audience, if you want to sit here, I'll just move over there for the presentation.
Yeah, that's
That'd be
fine.
helpful.
Oh, you can sit on the corner. Just
Sit over there.
Everybody's gonna,
Or sit on the, yeah.
want me to move? I'll move over there.
I meant
I'd
that
be able
corner.
to click through still.
You can sit right there, Michelle.
Drag it over
You
there.
can just sit there. Oh, he can. You can.
Musical chairs.
It's, it's
No,
ladder.
no, 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 no.
Oh. Oh, it's plugged in.
I have it plugged in.
Now we understand, Michelle.
All right, we're back.
Perfect.
Pardon the interruption. Okay, so MVP is part of a state-run grant program. It's designed to support the cities and towns to begin the process of planning for climate resiliency. It's kind of a two-part grant program. The first part of the grant is to go through an MVP planning process. So it's the planning grant. That's what Dudley is currently in the middle of, or probably 3/4 of the way through by now. The second part of that would be an MVP action grant. That's where cities and towns can apply for grant monies to fund those actionable items that came out of the workshop. It includes the workshop, which we had on January 10th, a report, which I have a draft here I just gave to John, and a listening session, which we're a part of today, and the core team will continue with the annual reporting on an annual basis. Kind of like I said, once you complete the MVP planning process, which we're about 3/4 of the way through right now, the town then becomes an MVP certified community. With that designation, then you can apply for the action grants. So this is just a map kind of showing how much of the state has already gone through this process. This map is current as of February 5th, I believe the date was, when the state announced the last round of funding. From my understanding, 82% of the state is either certified or is in the process of becoming certified and will be certified by June 30th of this year. So when we're thinking about that too, just to kind of keep this map in your head, this is who we're competing against when it comes time for action grants. These are all the certified towns or will be eligible at some point in the near future. And we also want to think that there's a regional aspect to the grant applications too. If you apply as an individual community, we can apply for up to $2 million. As a regional project, we can apply for up to $5 million. So thinking about who next to us, who shares a river with us, a stream, a watershed, all those things that could make something regional, not just by definition of the boundaries of a town line. So trying to kind of get the brain thinking that way too. The CRB, that's the workshop, Community Resilience Building. That's what the workshop is defined as. That's a community-driven process. It was led by John Ruda with a core team that included FD, water, sewer, highway. There was about 6 of us in that core team. We met 5 times, once in August, once September, November, December, and then again in January, right before the workshop was held. The bulk of those meetings was to sort out what it is we're going to do. What are we trying to accomplish during this workshop? What are the logistics? Where are we going to have it? It's also an invitation-only workshop. So it's who do we want in that room? Who do we not see in the rooms from time to time? Who can we pull in to be a part of this workshop? So all the stakeholders throughout town. In total, there was 34 attendees. That included local officials, department heads, local construction companies, businesses, nonprofits, adult daycare centers, There was representatives from multiple businesses, I believe I said that. What is it, the petting zoo, the schools, nonprofit groups. There was a very diverse cast of characters here that day. And since then, the other part to that was planning this listening session. So this date's been on the books for quite some time. It was designed that we would have enough time to hold the workshop, draft the report, come up with some of the findings, and then present it to the public. That's what we're doing here tonight. The objectives of the workshop were to define the extreme weather and climate-related hazards. We came up with 4. It was winter storms, wind events, flooding. I'm drawing a blank on the last one. Why?
Because we went back and forth.
Yeah, because we went back and forth. There was, the day of the workshop, there was a lot of discussion about
Earthquake.
whether or not to put earthquakes into this. Right, so are we prepared for earthquakes? Oh yeah, it's up here. Extreme temperatures, thanks, that was the last one. But there was a back and forth about whether or not earthquakes should be in there, and is an earthquake a climate-related hazard? Is it not? Are we prepared for it? Are we not? And the census was to go with extreme temperatures, because that affects us more often. It's more of a climate-related issue than earthquakes. But I think moving forward, people will have earthquakes in the back of their mind when making some decisions. We also identified the current and future vulnerabilities and strengths, developed and prioritized actions for the community and broader stakeholder networks, and identified opportunities for the community to advance actions. So those are kind of those actionable items. We'll kind of go through that whole process here shortly. When we were working through all those, with those objectives in mind, we were working through 3 kind of broader topics, kind of the baseline question, if you will. And that was, what is the infrastructure in Dudley? What does the society look like in Dudley? And what does the environment look like in Dudley? So we were identifying those features. So that was sort of the guiding question, if you will, right? What do we have in those 3 categories? Here it is. I guess I didn't have to fumble over that. The top 4 hazards that we identified were extreme temperatures, flooding, wind events, winter storms. And these are kind of big umbrella categories when you think about it. When we think of a wind event, we can think back to last spring when we had the tornado. We can think back of roughly a year ago in February when we had that February sunny day blowing 70 miles an hour in some neighborhoods around town, or excuse me, towns around town. So that captures kind of all the things in minus what the wind brings, right? So when we think nor'easter, it's wind and snow, so we just get rid of the snow and the wind. They're thinking about those wind events. The snow comes into those winter storms. Flooding is all that water from a hurricane or a summer nor'easter, those windy wet days. So kind of thinking umbrella categories here to capture as much as we possibly could when it comes to climate. When we were at the workshop in the morning, we had some presentations. So I just want to give everybody a little bit of a primer too, so we're all kind of working within the same, thought process or a similar process to the day we did during the workshop. So when we're looking at heat projections, we're looking like we're 50 to 100 years out. So by the mid-century, so roughly 2050, we're looking at a projected increase of 8 to 30 days annually of 90 degrees or above weather. Right? At first glance, it doesn't seem that bad, but when we think if it's on the high end of 30 days, 29 days roughly, that's roughly the month of July will be over 90 every day. Right? So that brings it home a little bit more, I think. When we look further out, to the 100-year mark, so the year 2100, it's projected to increase from 11 to 70 days. So now we're thinking kind of the last week of June all the way through the first week of September, it could possibly be over 90 degrees. I'm not saying that this is saying it's going to be consecutive days, but it's just over 90 in general. So just to kind of bring it home, to make it hit home, we're looking at almost an entire summer of 90-degree days. With that, the heat's going to have some impacts on the environment. So it's going to change the landscape. And when we're thinking about how much forestry there is in Dudley and the surrounding communities, if you look to the left side of the screen, that's what it is now. And then when we look to the right side of the screen, that's what the forest is going to change. So we're going to kind of change from a little bit more of a diverse forest of oaks, of different species, some white spruce, those kind of trees. We're gonna change over to more of a maple birch, beech birch forest. Right, so when we're thinking about that, maybe it doesn't seem like it's that big of an impact, but what is that gonna do to the undergrowth in the forest? What's that gonna do to the canopy of the forest? What kind of critters are gonna now move in? We're gonna have different kind of insects, different kind of animals. You know, is that gonna bring in different predators? You know, there's all kinds of things that could potentially happen. Another thing we were talking about during the workshop was annual days of precipitation of greater than 2 inches. It's not a huge impact, or it's not going to change drastically, but we're going to have highs and lows, it seems like, on a kind of maybe not annual basis, but it's going to fluctuate a lot. And it's looking like it's going to slightly grow by maybe a quarter to a half a day, kind of every 5 or so years. So when we're looking 100 years out, we're looking at like 3 to 3.5 days of over 2 inches of rain. So when we're thinking about those hot days, now everything's dried out. What's going to happen when we all of a sudden get 2+ inches of rain in a storm, right? What kind of problems is that going to create? Are we going to have kind of like a Phoenix effect where it's like a desert and everything turns into concrete, and then when it does rain, it doesn't have enough time to absorb. That water's going to run off and it's going to go somewhere, right? What kind of problems is that going to cause? Winter storms. This I think we can already see trending, right? The annual days below freezing is decreasing. We go outside today, the parks are full, there's 1 million people in the parks February 24th. Typically we don't see that, right? We don't see people in shorts and hoodies on February 24th. So with those rising temps, it's going to bring it's going to add more moisture to the air. That's going to bring more winter participation, but it's going to come in as rain or sleet or ice, right? Freezing rain. So we're not just going to get the standard snowstorm comes, it snows, we plow, we salt, everything is good to go. Now it might be, it snows, it turns to freezing rain, it turns to ice, it turns to all kinds of debris management, and all the problems that come with power lines down. Then maybe it turns over to rain, or it could go in reverse, right? Where we go to rain, freezing rain, sleet, snow, ice kind of trends. Lower snowfall accumulation in the winter is projected to have the most rain, right? The most water of some sorts. Summer's going to be dry, winter's going to be wet. So it could be snow, could be rain, could be ice, and then we'll have those dry summer months. The storms that do occur are going to be worse closer to the ocean. That's going to bring probably more heavier rains with a higher tides. It's going to bring a lot more flooding. I'm not sure Dudley has to worry so much about that, but we definitely have to think about how the changing winter storms are going to affect the population as a whole and whatever the infrastructures that we do have. Okay, so that was some of the background on what does it look like? What is the climate going to look like? So not necessarily the weather, the storm by storm, but what does it look like long term? The annual weather, right? The climates that we're going to be living in. During the workshop, those 34 people, we were broken out into groups. We broke out into 5 tables of 5 to 6 individuals. We're looking at those 3 focus hazards, right? The infrastructures, environments, and societal features. Looking at those, within those 3 broad topics, we looked at the 4 focus hazards: the flooding, the wind events, the winter storms, the extreme temperatures, and some of the tools that we used throughout the day were the matrix, which the people at home can see them. I believe most of you in the audience did see them. That's this big lined out sheet, all kinds of writing on it. We had a big table map. We had a packet of maps that just added another layer. So where were the dams? Where are the evacuation routes? What's the zoning? What's the water infrastructure? Where is it? There's another one, open space. Where's the open space? And an ortho map. We had brought in some of the hazard mitigation plan that was approved roughly a year ago, back in February of 19. We brought those strategies in. We brought those, what was already identified as critical infrastructure, right? So that was, where was the fire station, police station, all those things. Where are the well pumps? Where are the sewer pumps? All the water lines. So we brought those in to try to push the conversation forward a little quicker, right? We don't have to hash out everything that Dudley already has. It was hashed out roughly a year ago. Let's incorporate these plans. Okay. The first part of the day, we identified those 4 features, put them up in the top of the matrix, which we can see here, and then we started working through what are the features, right? Infrastructure, some of the things that were listed. I'll kind of run through. This is just kind of how we, as a group, move forward, right? So the first few hours after those presentations, we identified some infrastructure features such as dams. Dams is a big topic. In societal, we were kind of thinking, what does the town have that's not necessarily, we can't touch it, right? Culverts we can easily see, dams we can see, we can touch them, we can walk over them. But society, we can't always necessarily just see that, and it's not as easily tangible. So we're thinking elderly populations, renter populations, transient populations, when we're thinking of who's coming in for the school, right? Who comes to Nichols? What's the social engagement there? Among other things. Environmental invasive species came up quite often. That was kind of talked about at every table. Also thinking of like brooks, streams, watersheds, swamps, ponds, all kinds of environmental things came up. Beavers, nuisance species. And we were identifying these features, we were also thinking about where is it, right? This building, for example, pretty easy, has a physical address. It's Main Street, West Main Street, right? But when we're thinking society, that is not necessarily a hard address that we can look at. That might be an area, that might be a neighborhood. Alton Acres, Joshua Place, something like that, right? That's a broad area. When we're thinking environmental, invasive species, maybe that's town-wide. Maybe it's heavier, on the swamp. Maybe it's more over here by this pond. So location was a big conversation too. Ownership. This is a topic too. Is it public? Is it publicly owned, privately owned, state owned? Are we unsure? Well, is it John Smith's property? Well, no, he sold it to, Jane Smith back in the day. Who owns the water, right? If we're thinking about the lily pads and the invasive species that are coming into some of these smaller ponds, who's responsible for those plants at the bottom of the lake? Who owns that, right? Because these are going to be questions that need to be answered or started to think about when we're thinking about action grants, right? If we're going to do something to remove the weeds or remove the invasive species in the water, we have to figure out who owns it. Is it town owned? Is it privately owned? So these are some of the questions that sort of generated a lot of the topics that came up later too. We were also thinking about, is this a vulnerability or strength, right? And this is kind of that 2 sides of the coin. In some cases, maybe the dam is a strength, right? It retains the water, it provides us a lake, we have a public beach on that lake. On the other side of the coin, when we're thinking higher chances of more water, is the dam going to be able to handle that, right? Does the dam then become a vulnerability? Is the dam dated? Does it need maintenance? What are all the features to that dam? And we went through this for each line item that was written, and if you look at the matrix here, you can see there's quite a few, roughly a dozen lines for each category. That's quite a few. That's almost 40, probably in the low 30s, things that were identified. So there's a big discussion about where it is, who owns it, is it helping or hurting us? So that was the morning. A lot of presentations, and then getting through this side of the matrix. The afternoon, we kind of switched gears. We thought about actionable items. Right, we've listed all those features, we listed all the problems or things that we could identify where it was, who owns it, helping or hurting us. And then, what can we do about it within these categories? I know the presentation shows 3 columns there, I apologize for that, but there was 4, right? Does one thing not apply when it's a winter storm, or does it apply more when it's a winter storm, or a wind event, or a flooding event, right? How do we work around those? And what are those actionable items that we can go through to correct those issues or strengthen those categories? Another thing we did, we were prioritizing them, kind of just a generic high, medium, low. Is this a high priority to this group, on this day with this event? Is it medium, low? And then we gave it an estimated timeline too, kind of short, long, and ongoing. I don't know if we can see it. I don't know if I brought it. I guess I can flip this after. Yeah, one of the groups kind of added a little twist to that priority timeline too, or the timeline, and they kind of said the what we want it to be, and the reality. What's the reality going to be of that timeline? So some of the things where we want this like today, but in reality, there's going to need to be a study done. There's going to be permitting. There's going to be construction. So it could be 3, 5, 6 year project, right? These things might take time versus how soon we actually want them to be taken care of. Each table gave a summary. So as you can see, we're in this room. Those are the 5 matrices that we use. So 1 from each table. So when we think about that, that's a lot of information, right? That's a lot of information that was brought out in one day. And each table kind of gave a summary. What did they find? Kind of top 2 or 3 within each category. That was kind of a project that they wanted to highlight to the group. And as these table summaries started to come out, there started to be trends. The trends already started working themselves out. Dams was a hot topic. Vulnerable populations was a hot topic. What was the other one? Insects. That was another one, right? These are kind of bigger categories that captured a lot of different things. After the summaries, everybody got up and voted. The way the voted work was everybody got 5 stickers. We asked that each person vote however they so choose, but to put 3 stickers, or excuse me, 1 sticker in each, at least in each category. So they would vote for at least 1 infrastructure project, 1 societal project, and 1 environmental project. And the other 2 they could use to pump up another vote or vote for other projects, however they so fit. So I think what everybody is kind of waiting for, chomping at the bit to hear, is kind of what did the group find? What came out of this day, right? What were the bigger categories? What were the actionable items? What were the concerns and strengths and vulnerabilities throughout town? What can we do about some of these? So we'll kind of break this out. We'll go infrastructure concerns, strengths, and then actionable items. And we'll go through it kind of that way. Those 3, I guess, ways of looking at things through each topic. Does anybody have any questions so far? No? We're all good. I know most of you in the room were here that day, so I apologize for the rerun. Oops, didn't mean to do that. All right, so dams. Dams was one of the big concerns. There's 31 dams throughout the town of Dudley. 10 of those are town-owned. 2 are high hazard, 7 are significant hazard, and 1 is low hazard. And when I say high hazard or significant or low hazard, that just means that if the dam was to breach, it would affect a lot of there would be a loss of life, there would be a loss of businesses and loss of incomes, loss of properties. That does not mean that the dams are going to fail anytime soon. That just means that there's something on the other side of the dam. Like a low hazard dam might be in the middle of the woods, or it might be a farm pond dam, where if it breached, it would flood the woods and kind of no harm, no foul, right? Some of the dams that were brought up quite often were the Merino Pond Dam, Lower Merino, Carpenter Road, and the Gore Pond, aka Baker Pond Dam. This picture was courtesy of Michelle. This is the Gore Pond Dam. Well, kind of this is going back to what we talked about in the morning, was identifying those things. What do we have? Thinking about these dams town-wide, these are of concern. Some of them are old. They're getting old. They're aging. We need to do something about them. Stormwater management and flooding. We were thinking a lot along West Main Street came up quite often. Intersections of Center Road and Prospect Avenue. So kind of in front of Marty's or down by Yummy's. Those 2 kind of flood-prone areas. And how do we work with the state on a state road to get those flooding issues mitigated? There was also some talk about along 131 and along Schofield Ave. Those are some of the places that came up multiple times. Municipal facilities. These concerns were more of, there's kind of only one way in, one way out. Right? When we think of Indian Road, that's where the DPW is, animal shelter, recycling center, all kinds of stuff is happening up there. I believe the town's fuel systems are up there for the municipal vehicles. There's only one way in, one way out. What's going to happen as the climate changes? Is that road going to be impacted? Is it not? Also thinking about the high school, middle school. right? There's only one way in, one way out. That's all. The middle school is also the town's primary shelter, right? So in the events, in the changing climate, what's going to happen with these events? Are we going to have to open shelters more often? We're thinking these extremely long periods of hot weather, right? So these are kind of how some of these concerns were flushed out. Another thing to note, too, was with the longer, hotter periods of summers, we're thinking what's going to happen. We were kind of thinking as groups or individuals, we're thinking about groups, what's going to happen to the power, right? If everybody in town is running an AC unit, what's going to happen? Is that going to affect all the municipal buildings? Are the municipal buildings prepared to handle kind of blackouts, if you will? I know we're thinking kind of doom and gloom here, but I think it's something that we should be prepared for. If the projection is 50 to 100 years out, right? That's saying we have some time. We have some time to start better preparing for all these events. So some of the strengths that were identified when it comes to infrastructure, we're thinking about municipal resources, right? That's that service and support. Our policies, the town's policies, fully staffed police, fully staffed fire, highway departments, water services, right? We have all kinds of municipal resources. It's not just the building that collects taxes, right? There's all kinds of services that are provided. We'll talk a little bit more about those in society, and when we get to the societal features, we're thinking the library and everything that the library has to offer, senior center, veteran agent, all those municipal services, right? Those are strengths. Those are also infrastructure. It's not just necessarily something that you can touch like a dam or a culvert or a sidewalk or a tree, right? These are services provided. Excuse me. We can also think of the public water systems, right? That's that infrastructure that brings that public water to a person's house, right? Pay for those services, put those systems in place. Are there ways that we can improve and extend those services, right? The town's also proactive with water conservation. So on those dry days, we're not washing our cars, we're using water for what we need to. When permitted, we can, start washing the cars, watering the grass, all those other activities that come along with using the water. And that kind of goes in with the bylaws, right? Those wetland protection acts, the Conservation Commission bylaw too, which also goes above and beyond those stormwater management acts. So those are some of the infrastructure strengths that were brought up. Like I said earlier, we had 5 of these matrix, tons of information. I don't think we could put it all. We're trying to pack an 8-hour day into a short period of time here. So some of the infrastructure actions that were discussed and kind of prioritized. So once again, these were prioritized by each table and kind of how people voted. That's kind of how we put everything together with this high priority and the medium and low priorities. So some of the high priorities were a dam assessment. That was a town-wide dam assessment. Thinking especially the Merino and Lower Merino and the Gore Pond dams, aka Baker Pond dams. So the idea with that action would be to have a prioritization, a cost estimate. Is it a removal of the dam? Is it a repair of the dam? Is it a replacement? Does that dam need to be here? So there's still a lot of questions that the town doesn't necessarily know and have all the answers to. So that would be one of those actionable grant items, right? What can we do, or how do we prioritize all these dams? Can we get rid of them? Is there a different way to do this? Another thing that was talked about as an actionable item was kind of the water systems, both potable and waste. So drinkable and what are we trying to get rid of, right? And that was kind of backup power systems. That was more the overall encompassing kind of both. What are there alternate sources of power for these pumps, right? If the grid is being pulled upon because everybody's running AC and lights and this, that, and the other thing, do we have a backup plan for these potable water well pumps, the sewer system pumps, right? So that in the case something does happen, the way to get drinking water to a house is still there, that option's still there, and to remove waste from the households along with all the other municipal buildings.
No,
Oh, sorry, I thought there was a question. Stormwater management. This was kind of another thing of it's almost, I don't want to say it's free, but it is almost a free option of continually revisiting those bylaws, right? What can we do while we're and also maintaining the public awareness? So thinking in-house, right? These are those low-cost options that we can always revisit those bylaws. What can we do to manage the stormwater? There's also other options of green infrastructure, right? Is there swales? Is there places in the parking lot where we can put a place where the water will run off to a natural environment? That might be in the middle of the parking lot. That way the stormwater will go there. It'll be retained there. It's not going to create problems like pooling up in front of Marty's, right? Which creates all kinds of problems. The electrical grid, we kind of touched on that. The roadways and egresses, we were talking about that earlier. You know, what are we gonna do? Is there an alternate way into these places? Do we need to move them to higher ground, right? These low-lying areas. So thinking about all these different things that we might need to do. So kind of moving forward to the societal concerns. We're thinking about, or I should say, the group was thinking about senior residents, vulnerable populations, communications, and insect-borne diseases. And all these kind of go together in some way, shape, or form, right? They're all connected. We're thinking about senior residents, we're talking about Joshua Place. You know, thinking about maybe there's upgrades that need to be done. Is there gonna be additional housing? Do we already need additional housing units there? What's the situation going to look like when there's greater assistance, right? When we have those longer, hotter days, what are we going to do to remove the people who need the help, right? How are we going to go about removing them? Is there backup power sources there? Also, at the same time, thinking town-wide, right? The people who live by themselves, how do we reach them? And that's kind of where the communication comes in, right? How do we reach those people? How do we educate those people? How do we know they exist? To be sure that we can remove them in the case that they need for removal, right? And that doesn't mean remove you from your house forever. That just might mean, you know, you need to charge your phone, you need to cool down, come on down, we'll get you there. The communication part also goes with all the populations that sometimes might get overlooked, right? That's that renter population who might not be so engaged with the community. It could be the college students, right? They come, they spend the spring and fall semester, they leave for the summer. They're not too concerned about what's going on, but they are kind of, in some way, a responsibility of the town, right? I know it's more falls on Nichols, but I think in terms of when all these things are happening, when I think about those populations. Same with the renter population, right? They're here, but they're not homeowners. So maybe they're not paying taxes, and maybe they're not so engaged with the town hall and all those features that go on. So they might be missing some of those links where we have rave communication system to let people know what's going on in town. Maybe they're completely unaware that the town of Dudley even has a website. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but sometimes we get caught up in our own little lives and we're renters and we're not engaged. That we don't look at some of these things. The insect-borne disease, I think, falls into place with all of those things, right? All these communication measures. Where if we're thinking longer, hotter periods of summer, that's when the mosquitoes are going to start to thrive, right? They're going to be out more. That's when we have that triple E. Had a little bit of that this summer. Also thinking Lyme disease, right? We have shorter periods of below freezing, so now we have more ticks, right? So all those things go hand in hand. We'll get a little bit more into all those things later, but I just wanted to show these two maps. On the left-hand side is the population, the census data for populations over 65. These are relatively simple maps, but they give us kind of a general overview. On the right-hand side, that's percentage of renters. So if we were to overlay those together, we can kind of see there's some pockets where there are renters and there are populations over 65. You know, so what's coming with those populations? How are we communicating to those populations? The societal strengths, community as a whole, right? Community as a whole, and then those pockets of communities. We're thinking maybe the Alton Acres neighborhood or some of these renter population neighborhood, right? We probably have seen it as we're driving by or in those neighborhoods where people are helping each other out, right? We go help the old lady shovel out the end of her driveway during a snowstorm, rake the leaves. Maybe there's a communication thing, knock on the door, hey, everybody okay, right? So the community as a whole is a societal strength. Emergency shelters is another strength that the town has. Sorry, I'm just trying to connect all these dots at the same time, right? So when we're thinking of senior programming, kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, where we have a wildly active senior population in the senior center downstairs. The library always has things going on. That falls kind of back into that category of community, right? Along with communication. So those are all social networks in some way, shape, or form, right? So those are strengths. Public safety too. I don't want to just think that the public safety is just police fire, right? It's also DPW. It's also animal control. It's also the recycling center, right? These are all kind of public safety things. We have public water too. So it's not necessarily just, the badge and the flashing lights, right? There's all kinds of other public safety things that go on behind the scene. So those are big strengths that were talked about. I think I'm going to talk about it now. Yeah. So something that I thought was really impressive is kind of the vulnerable populations and everything that goes along with that. But throughout all of the groups, outreach, engagement, and participation were three of the big topics, right? Those are the big high priority items, which I was pretty impressed by. And I want to just kind of try to help understand outreach, engagement, and participation a little bit. So outreach would be that we posted something on the website. You can access it through any device nowadays, so we did our part. Engagement would be to kind of change that, right? There's a meeting, let's post it where the people go. Senior center, library, send a flyer home with the kids. Maybe go to the parent-teacher conference meeting to let people know that these things are happening, right? So there's that engagement piece. And the participation works on both ends, right? That both works on the municipality side and those who live and work and play here, right? You need to participate too in some way, shape, or form, right? Come to Selectmen's meetings every other Monday, it's an open invitation. Come participate, right? At the same time, we can think of participation when we go back to kind of that public safety thing, and there's coffee with a cop every once in a while, or I apologize for not remember what it was called, but the police fire go to the elementary schools and the kids high-five them on the way in school, right? There's that engagement piece. There's that participation piece. Try to get everybody involved. Because if the town is going to move forward on some of these action grants, there will need to be some participation on the public's end, right? It's going to affect you some way, shape, or form. The insect-borne disease, that education, that kind of falls into that whole outreach, engagement, participation thing again, once again. I don't want to jump too far ahead of myself, but when we're thinking about that insect-borne disease, we don't want to just necessarily put a sign out and hope that everybody sees it, right? We want everybody to know, is it going to be a higher cycle? What are the symptoms? What are the causes? Putting all those things out there, engaging with the public to make sure everybody knows what it is. And thinking back to that participation piece, is the public receiving this message and are you interacting with us? That kind of falls in line with the medium and low priority. That was not any kind of disregard to anybody, but we're also thinking of church institutions, right? Religious and spiritual institutions. How can we engage with them, participate with them? What do they have to offer us? How can they reach another population that maybe doesn't always get reached? The recreation service and opportunities, that kind of goes with the insect-borne disease, right? If in the summer the kids can't play baseball, they can't play soccer, football practice, all these things are canceled, they're up in arms, right? For those of you that have kids, I'm sure you heard it, pretty upset about why they can't go play baseball, why are Little Leagues canceled, right? So thinking about what can we do in this kind of, it's what can we do for the recreation things? Can we move things inside? I don't necessarily think we can build an indoor baseball facility, that houses soccer fields and football practices, but maybe is there a way that we can reshape those municipal, the recreation activities? Is it indoor flag football? Is it, we offer some sort of hockey thing where it's in the gym that we already have? So kind of thinking that way. Environmental concerns. Some of these will overlap, and we can see that just because it's an environmental feature or societal feature or an infrastructure feature they tend to overlap, right? We can already kind of see that in the societal piece. Those things have overlapping spots in many cases. Environmental concerns is the same way. Insect-borne disease, that was a big one. Forest maintenance. And when we're thinking about this, we're kind of thinking the forest as a whole. I have it here. About 55% of Dudley is forested, and about another 15% is vegetated. Right, so when we think about it, we're getting close to 70% of Dudley has some sort of forest aspect to it. Nuisance species was another thing that was brought up, and that's kind of thinking goes hand in hand with that insect-borne disease, but that's mosquitoes, ticks, gypsy moths, ash borers, beavers. That's those invasive species within the water systems, right? Lily pads, weeds. Are they choking out some of these small ponds? In the water resources, so kind of public wells, along with private wells. Some of the environmental strengths, it's almost like we took the coin and flipped it over, right? It's essentially the same thing that is potentially concerning to us, is also a strength to us. So we're thinking about that forested land. That provides canopy, right? Shade, places of recreation, outdoor recreation, water resources for both drinking as long as cooling off, so like the public beaches. Open space kind of encompasses all of them, along with public parks. Thinking in that nature, right? Parks with swing sets, parks for baseball, soccer, football, that kind of open space. So those are some strengths that were also identified. The environmental actions that were identified. Those were kind of the mosquito management. So what are the ways that we can deal with these mosquitoes and these insect-borne illnesses, Tripoli and all those things? Are there sprays out there? We didn't have all the answers that day, but this is something we were thinking about, so maybe there's a possible action grant moving forward, right, where we didn't identify every single thing. But we have that mosquito management. Is it an educational piece that's relatively free? Is it pamphlets that go out and say, you know, flip the buckets over, empty out your old tires? You know, get rid of that standing water that's just hibernating somewhere where the mosquitoes are breeding. Is it a bigger project? Is it joining the mosquito project? Is it also finding alternate sprays, right? So we're not just spraying some of the chemicals that are known to create all kinds of other environmental hazards. Is there environmental friendly sprays that we can use? Is it something that an individual homeowner, right, can get their hands on to spray their yards or themselves to be protected? Water resource protections. That was thinking of, are there other places that we can get public water resources, right? Is there ways for us to connect more of the public to those resources? So when we have these longer periods of dry days, private wells don't dry up, you know? Is that gonna be the case in 50, 100 years where we're having less rain or more frequent, heavier rain that's gonna run off quicker, where those wells can't get replenished as fast? You know, what are we planning to do for those? So those are some other things that I talked about. And then the open space and recreation plan, that's to update the plan from 2008. And then the open space stewardship, so that was thinking of the Dudley Land Trust, right? How do we help promote that? How do we help promote the stewardship of the resources that Dudley has to get people to I don't want to say follow the rules, but just kind of think things through a little bit more often. Do you really need to water your grass? Do we always have to have grass yards? Is there bylaws or something that could allow someone to change their front yard into a garden that might use a little less water, but it's going to provide some kind of fruit at the other end, you know, tomatoes, fruits, and vegetables, things like that. So kind of thinking in terms of things just slightly different. So not all of the things that were brought up that were actionable items were just some $1 million project where we need to permit it and rip this up and take the dam out and re-divert traffic and all kinds of construction things. Some of the things that were talked about were pretty low cost, almost no cost action items too. So we weren't just thinking, let's rely on this this grant program to solve all the programs or strengthening things. Some are just high-fiving the kids at the elementary school, right? Keeping that program going. Maybe it's when the parents drop the kids off, they can high-five the cops and firefighters too. Maybe there's a little engagement there, you know? Come to the meetings, see what we're doing. maybe little educational pieces there too. So that was kind of the half-hour roughly summary of an 8-hour day, plus a whole bunch of back and forth logistical meetings. This grant was awarded on July 1, so that process has been going on for almost a year now. So I tried to sum that up in 30 minutes. Kind of moving forward, the draft report, I just dropped that off with John. I want to allow the town a little bit of a chance to review that. Kind of had a time crunch here. Once we go back and forth with the town, I want to put it out to public comment for a couple weeks if the board is okay with that. That'll give the public a little bit more time to kind of digest what we did, right? What came out of it. It'll be a little bit more in depth so they can provide some comments back. The report doesn't need to be submitted by June 30, 2020. So that date is approaching rather quickly, but that does allow us, we have about, I would say, the month of April, right, to fine tune that draft, allow for the public to comment on it. Once we submit that, the state will review it. After the state's review, if all goes well, will then be designated, or the town of Dudley will then be designated as the MVP community. So like I said earlier, that designation then allows the town to apply for action grants. The core team hopefully will continually meet. You know, I know the town talks quite often, so maybe there might be some less informal meetings on a regular basis, and then maybe on a monthly or quarterly basis, the core team can get back together to try to refine these actionable items. You know, how many dots can we connect, right? Instead of just saying we want a fire pond, for example. I'm just making this up off the cuff here. You know, can we change the wording around a fire pond to include other things, right? Is it a sidewalk around it? Is there benches? Is it ADA friendly? Is it an educational piece where there's all kinds of things? Is it a stormwater management pond, right? And then it becomes a fire pond by putting a cistern in it, or a way for the fire department to hook into it, right? So there's all kinds of ways of we can redefine some of the things that we discussed in a relatively short day. When you think about it, 8 hours. It's a long day, but it is also a short day. So that's what we want to continually do. Refine those action grants. And I think this is what everybody's really concerned about here is how do we get those grants, right? How do we get this money? What's involved in it? What do we need to do? So the next round is expected in the spring of 2020. I don't know exactly how the state defined the spring, right? But I would think typically if we look backwards and try to reverse engineer this, usually grants are awarded July 1. So we would think they need time to review and approve. So they probably need a good 6 weeks to do that. That puts us into the middle of April. Then that also needs everybody to apply. Oh yeah, Hillary's here, so I guess she could speak on that. End of April, early May? Okay, so there we go. Heard it from the state's mouth. End of April, early May. I don't have to reverse engineer it. Thank you, Hillary. I kind of touched on this earlier in the evening. As an individual community, we can apply for up to $2 million, right? With that does come a 25% cash or match, right? So we want to be thinking about that too when we're going to like town meetings. Do we have a line item? Do we have budget for that 25% match? Hillary is here, so she can correct me if I'm wrong, but these can be cash or in-kind match. Can't use state funds to match state funds, but we can use federal funds. So maybe there's hazard mitigation funds that could be used if those were available. CDBG funds is a possible source. Private monies, that's another thing when we think back to that workshop. We're inviting private businesses who may be affected by the climate, who might have some skin in the game, right?
Or in kind, right?
Right. So there could be an action grant that might help a private business help, right? Maybe with a flood problems. Maybe that gets mitigated through an action grant. And maybe the way that during that workshop, that relationship was built a little bit more, and maybe there's a way for them to help out with some of that match, right? So there's all kinds of different ways. It doesn't just have to fall on the town. And I do believe that staff hours are allowable for the match. I do believe that town equipment is allowable for the match. Maybe. We'll get back to that one. So thinking about that, right? that in-kind match for an up to a $2 million project. I haven't seen a $2 million project to be awarded. Granted, the program is only 3 years old. I have seen two, on separate occasions, $1 million approvals. All right, so they are giving this money away. I shouldn't say it's scot-free, but with that 25% match. We can also think of regional projects, right? What is a region? We can think Dudley's split by watersheds. 2 watersheds, the hill separates us into 2. We can also think streams. What's upstream from us affecting us? Is there ways that we can do things with a different partner who might not just be the typical region of the town lines, right? Who's the next town over? Maybe it's who's way up the river. I can't say down the river because the river kind of ends in Dudley, but you know, who's on the other side, Webster town line. But thinking that way too, not just the typical way of thinking. Another thing to think about too is that the grants are typically awarded for a 1 year, 365 days cycle, right? So the grants are typically awarded July 1. All work must be completed by June 30. So it's also thinking about these action grants in pieces to think out. Like kind of we talked about it a little bit a little while ago, is that not everything is just that simple, right? Where it was that wants versus reality. Like we want this to be done today, but in reality it's going to be a 4 or 5 year project, right? So maybe the first grant cycle or the application would be for, you know, the study, the engineering study. Maybe the study's already been done, right? And we already have what we need to do, so we can use that study and then put it into these applications. Say, see, we did this study, this is what the findings were, this is what the recommendations were. Now we need to go through a permitting cycle, right? So we'll get all those permits out of the way, and then year 2 would be construction, or however that process may go. So trying to think of all the variables here versus like a FEMA grant, which is a extremely hard grant to get, and that's on a 3-year cycle, right? Typically there's extensions that need to be had there, so we're kind of trying to think, how do we break things down? And then when we're applying for those grants, say that in the application process. We've thought this out. This is a 5-year project. This is a 7-year project. This is a, you know, X number of year project. But what we're trying to do now is take this piece. We need to resolve this piece first. So that's how we kind of want to think about things moving forward. I'm going to open it up to questions and comments.
You want a drink?
I have one right here. This is my opportunity to refresh myself.
Before I go to questions and comments, I want to thank Peter. It was a comprehensive presentation that he presented us, and as he did state, he did go a little bit over, but he was on a roll, so we figured let him roll. But I also would like to thank all the people that participated in the original workshop. As he said, it was quite an extensive group of town officials, town people, outside people. And if you want to go to the website and look at some of these awards, there is definitely a financial carrot at the end of the rainbow, and I certainly appreciate Peter's efforts, Town Administrator Ruta's efforts, and everybody who did participate in that workshop. I saw familiar faces in the pictures. So at this time, I will open up to questions from the board, and then we'll go to the public. Anybody have any questions for Peter? Paul?
As always. Dudley currently has somewhere in the vicinity of, I believe, 4,500 acres, 4,500 acres, that is in some kind of protection, whether it's 61A, 61B. The majority of that land is in 61A. Now, we had a citizen come before us at our last meeting and asked if we would approve adopting or accepting a state program that would pay owners of agricultural land up to 95% for the right to develop it, basically. My question is this: is there any mechanism in the state or a regulation the town can adopt that will enable the town to take ownership legally of any of the APR land, especially those APR lands that are not currently being farmed or for which there's no known intention to farm,
Right at first.
to keep them going into the hands of developers. Is there anything that we can do with the state or any regulation we can adopt? Because some of those lands include watershed and certainly surface water. And we have a finite amount of that now. And it's always gonna be finite. But I'm trying to think of a creative way that we can gain access to some of the type of lands with water that are currently under 61A that would improve or expand what we currently have access to.
That's quite the question. I'll do my best. Some of that is definitely out of my scope of expertise. I'll openly admit that. Through this program, there is possible land acquisitions, right? That can happen, but I don't know exactly how that would work if it's a private property, or to change the definition of the land. I think that's more of a zoning thing. You know, I don't have the answer to that. I don't really want to give you the false information, but I can probably go back to the office and ask around and find out what would be the best way to go about that.
I'm very curious about that.
You know,
And I'm not saying we take the land away from anybody.
yeah,
I'm saying we do it legally,
right.
where the current landowner is satisfied, and the town becomes very satisfied with what it can accomplish if it's able to do that sort of thing.
So I guess the question, Peter, is, I know you're looking at Hillary for a second, is that something we would, as a town, would pursue through Central Mass, or do we have to pursue that,
Well, that wasn't my
Outs-
question, but that's a better question.
right, yeah, outside of you or Central Mass? Is that, you said you can go back and ask around, but is that something,
So I think we're a good place to start. You know, we can definitely guide you in the right direction, or connect dots or exchange information. There are some things that we can do, you know, bylaw rewrites, stormwater management, those kind of things we can definitely do in-house. But when it comes to like the legality of who can buy, who can sell, all those things, I don't know if we're the best place. None of us in the office are lawyers. None of us in the office are engineers, right? So there is some limitations to what we do. We do work with 40 different communities. We have a lot of good relationships with your neighboring communities. So there's ways that we may have heard of somebody else in a different town doing this. So we can connect those towns. We have a lot of good relationships with private industries, right? Private consulting firms, private legal firms. So we can put you in touch with them, right? We're not a legal firm. We're not an engineering firm. I don't want to mislead anybody. So I know these are kind of deflective questions,
right?
but I don't really have a concrete 100% confident answer for either one of those questions. But we can definitely help point you in the right direction.
I'm gonna ask your colleague to introduce herself and.
Hi, my name is Hillary King. I'm the MVP Central Regional Coordinator, and Dudley is part of the Central Region. And
Speak up just a little bit.
sure. Do you want me to start over? I'm Hillary King, the Central Regional Coordinator for the MVP program, and Dudley is the southwesternmost community in that region, and the new regional coordinator positions for the MVP program have been developed in hopes of connecting municipalities with more information regarding these questions. I think that a lot of the comments and questions that come out of this listening session today will hopefully be recorded into the documentation, and I'm happy to speak with anybody or attend additional core team meetings in order to facilitate these conversations and get other other agencies or partners, potential partners involved. So I think it's great to bring up these questions and these topics in this arena. And again, I'll give you my card after the meeting. I'm happy to connect more on that. So
Excellent.
Peter and I may not have a lot of the answers tonight, but we're happy to help make those connections afterward.
That's all that matters.
Excellent.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Jay?
More a comment. Glad to see there was great engagement between quite a few members of the town and the public involved in ascertaining where we really are here. No real questions at this time. Sounds like the core team has their work cut out for them.
I know you came kind of late to the missed the presentation. You probably don't have any questions, unless you have questions from the documentation. presented.
No, nothing from what I read from the packet, no.
Kerry?
That was a very thorough presentation, very thorough, thank you. I'll echo what Mr. Johnson said. It seemed like the core group has a good handle on this, and we'll see what comes out at the bottom of the funnel and run with it. Thank you.
It's interesting too, if folks didn't get the handout, and I'm sure we can provide you one, of the towns, the MVP action grant. There was 54 communities involved in 52 grants totaling over 10 million. And when you read some of the ends for the grants that created the funding, as Peter stated, went everywhere from flood to land conservation, parking lot infrastructure projects. I mean, it's pretty comprehensive, and as I thank the group, I'll echo what was said up here. I know the group's got a lot going forward, so we certainly appreciate all the input and all the expertise being brought to bear on this. Administrator, anything you want to add?
No, Mr. Chairman, of course, Pete did a great presentation, and everybody who participated really helped to get us to a point where we're now eligible to apply for this funding, so we're not going to drop the ball. We're full steam ahead.
Excellent. If the board's okay, I'll open up the comments from the public. I know there's people here that participated in that workshop, if they want to speak. Anybody from the general public that would like to speak on the presentation as presented? Going once? Seeing none, again, on behalf of the town, I would thank Peter Peliquin, Central Mass Regional Planning Commission, his colleague Hillary King from the Central Coordinator's position for her input tonight. We thank you folks very much.
Thank you all for your time. I apologize for running a little
Oh, that's all
long,
right.
but I'm glad everyone appreciated the efforts.
Yep.
So thank you again, and have a good night.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hillary.
Want to
Get
keep,
this out of your way, and we can get
Yeah.
reorganized too.
want to take 2 minutes, let them wrap it up? Or?
Yeah, get like 2-minute
All right,
recess.
we're gonna just recess for a couple minutes just to let Peter take down his presentation.
I'll be the first.
Good
one
evening,
online to bring
everyone.
it myself.
At this point, we will return to agenda. We, again, like to thank everyone for sitting through the presentation. It was informative, and it's part of our hopeful trend. We're trying to get more grants and stay on top of these things. We already accepted the minutes. Next up is number 4, police full-time appointment, effective March 15, 2020. Chief Wayner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everyone. As you know, I thank the board again for declaring an opening as of March 15th for this year. So last week I was able to assemble 2 of my 3 sergeants, get together and interviewed and reviewed 3 of our candidates as per our rules and regs. And so I submitted a letter to you in the order that the sergeants had ranked them. And before you here tonight is Mariano Conti, who's one of our reserve officers. Mariano's done a great job so far for us. He was clearly the consensus candidate for the top spot in this position. He currently works at UMass Hospital in Worcester as a full-time police academy. He's a town resident. Just recently moved to town back in the fall of last year. That would make the late Mr. DiDonato very happy because he was always big on town residents. And also, as you know, residents usually get a preference when all things are considered equal. Family man, and I think he'll do really well for the department. So with that, I would ask the board to give my recommendation and ask the board to appoint Mariano Conti to a full-time position effective on March 15th of this year.
Mr. Conti, anything you'd like to add? Anything you'd like to add?
No, I just appreciate your time and your consideration. I know I met you guys back when I was a reserve, when you elected me for the reserve position. So I really appreciate it. I've had nothing but positive experience being new to the town, new to the police department. I actually was able to bring my son today to the fire department. I think he's going opposite direction as I, but so far it's been a positive experience all around.
How long have you been an officer at UMass?
I graduated the academy in November of 2018. I was employed by them in May of 2018.
Excellent. And you got appointed when on Dudley last year, right? Towards the fall or the.
Correct. Towards the end of the.
Right around around midsummer in that range. I believe it was official at that point. Yeah.
6 months. Okay. Any questions, Paul?
Yeah, I'm assuming you've worked enough shifts to have some opinions. We take no offense to opinions.
Well, speak for yourself, sir.
Well, for the most part. So my question is twofold. One, what's the most challenging experience you've had so far? And not to put you on the spot, but that will tell us a lot about you. And secondly, what's the most interesting experience you've had so far?
Okay. Well, for me, because I'm new to the town, my most challenging is learning all the roads. Luckily, there's GPS, so I'll be okay there. And obviously, like any department, it's kind of getting used to everyone's personalities and kind of the way things are done. And then for your second question, I would probably say would you ask my most positive experience or rewarding?
Pay attention to what I say. The most interesting.
My most interesting? Honestly, it's just, for me, probably would have to be that everyone and I'm not just saying this because my chief is to my left, but everyone in the department, from patrolman all the way up, has been nothing but super helpful. So that to me has been, I've had not one negative thing to say. So.
Well, there's nothing negative to say, really.
Correct.
Thank you.
We're just glad he didn't ask you what your hobbies were this time.
Fun fact.
What do you do in your spare time? No, I'm just kidding. Mr. Massey.
Well, fun fact is that's my life.
You're a fun guy.
I think I am a fun guy. No, I think it's great that as that you live in Dudley and the homegrown, which sort of is like being a homegrown, the farm team sort of here is good to bring people along. So glad you're here.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Yep.
Gary?
A statement and then a question. First, I've noticed, like was stated earlier, that the late Selectman DiDonato like local people, and I do as well. I've noticed that a lot of people in the department are either from Dudley or one town over, and I'd like to think we've got an excellent department here. And some of those people that I respect have chosen you, so that's high praise in my opinion. My question to you is, you're currently working for UMass. Are you going to continue there, or are you just going to be here in Dudley?
No, I've already notified my chief and my lieutenant that I was in the process, and I'm not going to tell them until it's official. And I'll be leaving there and just dedicating all my time to Dudley Police.
Two-parter. You've had an opportunity to have a few shifts here, and you've been at UMass. What's the difference between working there and here, and why do you want to be here as opposed to there?
So different types of calls. At UMass, most of my calls are in the emergency room, and they're dealing with situations that people are already they're at a volatile state, so they're already escalated. So if we get called somewhere, it's probably because staff couldn't handle it, and now we're dealing with somebody who's very agitated. Where for Dudley, I'll still have those types of calls, but I'll also be able to have calls where it's more proactive policing versus reactive policing. And also at Dudley, I have the opportunity to do community policing, where I can't do that working for UMass. Where I know here we're involved in like High Five Fridays, and I love kids, so anything I get involved in to kind of help out the community, kind of give back, that's kind of the positive and the plus working for a town versus at the hospital.
Good answer, thank you.
Chief, where does Mr. Conti stand like with his training? I know you said he was appointed. We appointed him last year, and I know there's a certain amount of time they have to ride, right, with senior officers or training. I see Marek and Sergeant Carlowitz in the back.
No, he's been released and working on his own for quite some time because, as I think he's picked it up pretty well. But for anybody, even myself, when you came here from out of town, it's just learning the roads. That's one of the biggest things. But with his training and his experience and everything already right now, the job itself was not a real problem. So it was just kind of basically learning the in-house computer systems, and he was able to pick up and run with it right away. And it is a credit too, also, even though he's been here a short time. It's one of the things that I think it's good about the way we do the hirings here, where you get a chance to at least kind of see somebody and know how they're going to act, know how they perform, get a kind of chance to evaluate them on their performance based, as opposed to just having someone apply from the outside and show up and say, hey, I'm looking for a job. So it's been a real plus. But I think he'll work out very well. He's picked up well with people and everything. I think the only thing he's having trouble finding is a good pizza place, since he's highly Italian. He doesn't fit in with all of us Polish people. So, but that's one of the. I'm sure he'll be looking to Mr. Massey for a recommendation on that.
It's going to be Wilmington, though. It's not going to be Dudley. Town administrator, anything like that?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Al, you always like to ask a question. You all said, or?
Thank you for coming out and taking the job. It's great.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Yeah.
Board members good? Mr. Massey, I know you had your hand up for
Yeah, no, I mean,
quite
just,
some time right now.
I've heard enough, and I think I'd be proud to make a motion to appoint, excuse me, Mariano Conti to be our newest full-time police officer, effective March 15th, 2020.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion, state aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Do you have anybody,
We can get some,
have anybody from your family to do pictures, or?
We'll take a photo
Well,
of it right
baby's sick, so I came by myself.
Oh,
All right.
She's 7
get you
months
back
old,
home.
so-
Come on up.
We'll get you back home.
Michelle, you want to take a group photo, or
Sure.
get a poster or whatever?
I don't have my phone.
Well, you probably got to come around the back. Either way, whatever. Congratulations, Smile.
Thank you.
Welcome to the job. Congratulations.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Just face Michelle on your feet. On your feet. Yeah.
Wow.
Wouldn't be a meeting without.
Told Marcy to
Voice from
stand
the
up.
crowd told Mr. Mazzi to stand up.
Good luck.
Thanks again.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Nice to see you, Sarge. Oh!
That, save that
He
one.
was
I
ready.
love that. See, I always ask that. You gotta be ready.
Resignations.
Was that Mr. Zakowski by any chance?
Who else?
How'd you recognize his voice?
Because we hear it enough.
Oh, jeez.
Sticking up for you.
Bob's everywhere.
Want to help out, huh?
Resignations under 5A, we have a,
Mr. Chairman, I have a resignation from our friend Don Johnson, who, for medical reasons, will not be returning to his position and has resigned. And I've also prepared a letter for the board to sign after accepting the resignation, thanking him for his service. And on a personal note, he's always been very easy to work with. He was the first one in my office when I came through the door and took over this role, and his rapport with the community has been impeccable. Somebody comes in for help, Don will help him. So regretfully, I ask you to accept his resignation and consider signing this letter.
right, and I also, as a board member, but as a resident, I had a chance to interact with Don. He was always quick with the information that we asked for. You know, he's always helpful. He had a good handle on things. And I just would like to, as you dialogue with him, not counting this letter, when he does feel well enough, I'd like to have him come in before the board, if possible, in the future,
Absolutely.
and
And
give him a chance to really get recognized.
we should not forget that he bailed us out when we needed bailing out. You know, he really came through for us.
So, Mr. Chairman, Bill Scanlon will continue on in that role until at least June, until we can make another arrangement.
Okay. That was my next question, but I know I discussed with you, I was gonna give you a chance. So people out there that have been interacting with the planning office, there'll still be coverage there and feel comfortable knowing that the town will still be proactive and help. So at this time, the chair will entertain a motion to accept with regret the resignation of Don Johnson, effective
So moved.
today.
Second, with regret.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. Don, just get well,
Thank you,
most
Don.
important.
Feel better.
Next up on resignations, Pellerino, Jimmy Doria. This is to notify you I'm resigning as constable for the town of Dudley, Mass. I have enjoyed serving the town of Dudley. I know the administrator has spoken to Jimmy in person and on the phone. So again, the chair will entertain a motion to accept with regret the resignation of Pellegrino Jim Doria as town constable.
So moved.
Moved by Mr.
Second.
Johnson, second by Mr. Marcy. Any discussions? Hearing none, all in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Mr. Ruda, can you craft a letter either for my signature or on behalf of the board thanking him for his service?
Will do.
Thank you.
Jimmy.
Town Administrator's Report, Mr. Ruda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. An update on our cybersecurity vulnerability study. The assessment report will be completed by our next regular meeting on March 9th, 2020. And the board will receive a briefing and executive session on that date. If possible, it would be very helpful if the entire board could attend. MVP, I think we've heard enough about that for tonight. There's no new information beyond what you heard tonight. We just covered Don Johnson. Our road betterment program. So following our letter to residents of private roads, I've received a very poor response from residents who may be interested in taking advantage of the road betterment program. As you recall, I sent out a letter to all residents of private roads to give them an opportunity to come in and learn more about the program. So the idea of having a larger crowd for a spring informational meeting is not going to be an option. For those residents that have responded, I'm going to meet privately with each and ask Michelle to set up those meetings in June for me. I'm very concerned about continuing to kick the can on this decades-old issue. I'd like to ask the board to begin thinking in terms of a public policy for the snow removal and repair of private roads, particularly where the condition of the private roads poses a certain risk to the damage of snow removal, plowing, and other highway equipment. I think we should carefully consider that beyond the cost of repairing equipment damaged during a snowstorm, We also run the significant risk of losing the ability to use the damaged equipment, diminishing our ability to keep all of our roads open during a storm. I also believe that any public policy or policy direction that the board wishes to adopt will be subject to at the very least, legal expenses. So as we enter into the budget season, I will propose an amount of money to add to the legal budget as part of this ongoing discussion and deliberation about private roads. I'll also ask Michelle to place an item on our next agenda, giving the board the opportunity to request any additional information from me or any department head or our legal counsel that it may require. We do not necessarily have to take any vote at the next meeting, but we should continue to move towards a budget figure and the adoption of a public policy to address private roads. So I'm available. I'll get you any information you need over the next 2 weeks, and I'm going to just keep putting on the agenda until we can craft something that makes sense for everybody.
You know, I don't want to hold up your report. I mean, these private roads predate Paul and I on the board, and some of these private roads predate my time on the planning board. I agree with you. It's not just so much that we're risking the damage to the equipment, but when that equipment's down, it impacts the whole operation.
The whole town, correct.
Right, and I know this goes back to the administrator before the last administrator, who took a proactive approach at one point and notified all private roads that the town was gonna move away from it. That was probably the most well-attended meeting we had of private roads. I'm certainly not saying we should use any kind of threat or enticement to get people in here, but if we have to use something to get people in here, we're gonna have to, we gotta figure this out. We can't continue on. And I like your approach so far. Let's get with the highway superintendent or the foreman, find out what's exactly being damaged, what's the cost, what's the ramifications moving forward, and if we have to get legal involved to correct this issue, we need to do it now. No more pushing it off with special requests and.
We just simply, it's too much of a risk at this point to continue to push it off. If we're starting to snap plow pins and have all kinds of problems over the winter, I mean, we're putting the entire town at risk.
Right.
In terms of being able to respond to snowstorms if we were losing equipment like this.
Right, I think the time has come. That's the only way I can phrase it. Sorry to interrupt your report,
No
Mr.
problem.
Administrator.
APR incentives. I spoke with Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources, the MDAR, on a conference call this morning. On the call was Gerald Kennedy, excuse me, who's the Director of the Division of Agriculture and Technical Assistance, Ashley Randall, who's the agency Deputy Commissioner, and Ron Hall, who is a program coordinator. I expressed my concern about the manner in which the MDAR offered an additional incentive to one of our local constituents prior to the local adoption of the incentive, and in the absence of any warning or information required for the board to take an informed vote on the issue. I also took issue with the response that Michelle Jervis received from the agency when she requested additional information, as the board asked her to do at our last meeting. After a discussion of the program and an overview of the use of APR land and an overview of the roles and responsibilities of federal, state, and local government in relationship to the APR and 61A designation, I suggested that the MDAR present an overview in person to the Board of Selectmen at a date in June, and they've agreed to that. They did apologize for the response that Michelle received and agreed that it was not the way that they expected any of their employees to deal with local governments. And as the MDAR acknowledged, the town of Dudley has the highest amount of chapter-designated land in Worcester County, and it is a natural starting point for them to provide outreach for the APR and 61A programs that are now 40 years old and are now actively under review. And they also agreed at my request to go back to our local constituent and explain that the Board of Selectmen did not say no, but only requested additional information that had not yet been provided by the MDAR. So I'll let the Board of Selectmen know when the presentation will take place. It will definitely be in the month of June. And then my recommendation would be to make an informed decision and vote on whether or not to adopt that process that was proposed to us at the last, I think it was the last meeting, right?
Right, I just want to touch on that too briefly. At our last meeting, a citizen resident came forward and wanted us to take action. He had conversed back and forth with the state, and he was looking at us to adopt a form, and, you know, rightfully, in his opinion, he thought it was kind of boilerplate, and whether it was or wasn't is immaterial at this point, but as a board, we decided as a group, as we've done historically, we don't take action without information. And our administrative assistant reached out as requested, and somehow the recipient of the phone call didn't take it kindly. And we back our employees when they need to be backed, and we chastise our employees when they need. Our office, more specifically Michelle, handled herself in a complete professional manner. As Jonathan's report indicates, the state folks that he talked to agree. So we're not, for all the folks out there that contacted me about Dudley being a right-to-farm community, and there was a lot of talk that the Board of Selectmen doesn't support that initiative, we did not say no, as Jonathan said, we did not say no to the action that was requested. We asked for more information. It is our intent, I speak for myself, but I think I speak for the board, that we're going to take all the information we can gather and make an informed decision at a later date. As Jonathan said, it may not be till the month of June. So the people that think the board was turning a blind eye and a deaf ear to the request last week, nothing could be further from the truth. I'll open up the comments from, after thanking the administrator for his report, I will open comments to board members. Mr. Joseph.
Yeah, anybody who made those accusations didn't watch the meeting. Didn't even watch a tape of the meeting. They were probably getting it by word of mouth from someone who doesn't know what the hell they were talking about. That's number one. Number two, on the statement here, Jonathan, where they said that Dudley has the highest amount of chapter designated land. That's kind of obtuse. Are they referring to the percentage of land in terms of the overall town land, or are they saying the most acreage?
The most property designated with that agricultural designation is what they meant.
So it's got to be the acreage,
and
the
compare-
4,500 or so
I would
acres.
think so, because there are there's could be one owner for multiple different pieces of property, so to just say there's 17 properties, for example, that are in APR, it doesn't provide the overview of,
Okay.
in comparison to the rest of the
I just want to know what they
county.
meant by highest amount
The highest amount the highest amount of agriculture
in the state,
in the county, in Worcester County, and certainly
or in Worcester County.
in Worcester County, but certainly at the high end of the state.
Thank you very much.
Only second to the western part of the state, I would imagine.
Okay.
Any other questions on the report or on what happened 2 weeks ago?
Said it all.
I'm good. I wasn't at the meeting, Mr. Chairman, but I did hear about it and promised I would talk to the administrator and the chairman about it, which we did. So I think it was handled appropriately.
All right, so no motion required, just unanimous consent to accept the administrator's report as presented. Thank you. Next up, license and permits. Henry Sales and Service. Henry and Sophia Sislick, 65 Schofield Ave, would like to amend a Class 2 secondhand license from maximum 15 space to maximum 8 spaces. Would like to come forward. Jonathan, this doesn't require a public hearing?
No, this is the license change.
Okay.
This is Zosha.
Yep.
She's the smart one of the family.
Henry, you're not gonna come up?
And it came to, but he always
I know.
sit in the back, so let him sit there.
Said Sophia. It's been working for how many years, right? Let it keep going.
Sometimes he let me be boss.
Oh, yeah. Only when you're awake, right? Yeah. Good evening.
Hi, Zosha.
So, Jonathan, Mr. Administrator, what's the purpose tonight?
I believe it's I'm going to defer to Michelle, so I
They
don't
have
say it wrong.
15 spaces.
They'd like to cut them down to 8,
Allocated.
correct?
You want to go down to 8?
You want to cut them down to 8?
Right, well,
Now, they're gonna keep 15.
no, they're not, they have 15 right now. They have a
Well, they're
maximum
gonna
of
keep
15
15
spaces.
total on the property.
Right now, they have 15 spaces,
Right.
right? Now, they have a renter there, Sam,
What's coming up later?
and he's not here yet, but he should be. And he wants to sell vehicles, but he doesn't have the space for additional places to park the vehicles. So Sosha and Henry are giving 7 of their spaces to Sam. And they are keeping 8 spaces.
Okay.
So the total doesn't change, just the way it's gonna be
No, the total
allocated?
doesn't change, it's just a split,
Okay.
Okay.
as you can see on the map that Henry,
So instead, so I guess the premise was instead of just saying use our spaces, you rent from us,
You're gonna
they
give us
want to do it the right
designated.
way and come back and license them to the, correct.
So my only question would be, those spaces are gonna be dedicated to him, and on the handout we got, he's gonna have spaces numbered 3 through 9. So, for example, the mechanism to keep them apart would be yourself and Henry would maintain 10 to 15, 16 and 17. So if, for example, Sam would not someday have an extra space, he wouldn't be able to take space 10. That's gonna be dedicated to you folks, and the other ones are dedicated to him. Okay.
No problem.
Everybody good? Mr. Murphy?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the license, excuse me, for Henry Sales and Service, 65 Schofield Ave. We're amending a Class 2 secondhand vehicle license from a maximum of 15 spaces to a maximum of 8 spaces.
Motion made.
Second.
Multiple seconds. Michelle, you can sort it out after. Any further questions or concerns? Hearing none, all in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Unanimous, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
very
guys.
much to all of you.
Yep.
Nice
Yeah.
job, Henry.
We appreciate it.
Good to see you guys.
Thank you.
Next up, Nichols College. The always available Lynn Luby.
The great Lynn movie.
Good, great. Presenting on behalf of Nichols for outdoor entertainment license, requesting Friday, April 17th, 8 to 11 for an outdoor movie night.
Just one?
You can give us the locations after, Lynn, if you want. Thursday, April 30th, 12 to 5, senior celebration field day. Friday, May 1st, 10 a.m. to midnight, senior events, brunch and a one-day social. Thursday, May 7th, 8 to 5, employee appreciation day. Lynn, you just want to go over like the locations where those are going to be?
Yep, the outdoor movie night is going to be in the athletic center area. It'll be on the outdoor volleyball courts.
It's down below by the parking lot there?
Correct. The senior celebration field day, that takes place in the athletic area. So some of it's on the softball field, baseball fields, you know, it's in the athletic center area. The senior events, the brunch and the one-day social. The brunch takes place in the dining hall, but there is some outdoor music that takes place. And then the one-day social in the evening is near the Chamois Residence Hall and one of the Copper Beaches on the green there.
Between that little area they got?
Not necessarily between, but behind.
Oh, okay.
Yep,
Okay.
yep. And then the employee appreciation is kind of all over campus. We set up like a breakfast outside Academy Hall, and then we have a couple of food trucks come, and they're by the auditorium. And then we have a tent that's used in the same location that the senior night, celebration night was, so kind of near the Copper Beach quads.
Okay, now, through the administrator, does any of these events require like an expanded fire and EMS coverage or police coverage, and if so, has that been addressed?
I'm going to ask the subject matter experts.
All right,
I've been in contact with you.
Whatever requires a detail from what the school's always put about contact and
okay.
So there will be paid police details?
I will go over it again, which ones are out. There are some that involve alcohol, I think there's others that aren't, so I'll.
And we've always allowed you to make that decision. But if need be, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
It's okay.
If need be, there will be outdoor, there will be
Oh,
paid details. You don't want
And
that.
same with EMS coverage, right? If required.
sometimes it's like a crowd manager or firefighter, but generally it's based on the number of people. They have certified crowd managers too, but they've been good. They call me, her office calls me
Okay,
Plenty of notice, so it's all good.
just double checking. Any further questions for,
Mr. Chairman,
applicant,
if
Mr.
there are no
Joseph.
questions,
I actually have
all right, Terry.
Gary?
food trucks. What's our policy with that? Do they have to go, do the food trucks have to get a permit? Do they have to go to the Board of Health? Do we have any sort of a policy on that?
You want to come up, Jen?
I thought there were, I
think
just
they-
want to
I
make
think-
sure this is buttoned up before we vote on it.
Well, we have no, what's our local on that?
Hi.
Just goes by the state?
Yeah, but if
Jen
there's a
Canoia,
food
by the
truck-
way, Board of
yeah,
Health.
I'm sorry.
It's
Yes.
okay.
If there's a food truck
Oh.
coming into town that's not licensed in town, they have to get a one-day special food permit from the Board of Health.
And that falls on the owner of the truck, would that be Nichols making sure that the people have what they need?
It basically falls on the owner of the truck, but Nichols should check to be sure that your food trucks do get licensed through the
Be
town.
aware.
Because our
Good
health
call.
inspector
Nice-
needs to go
good
out.
call.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask one more question?
Ask as many you want.
In general about food trucks,
Mhm.
do we have any regulations in town? Can a truck just show up out here in front of West Main Street and open up a door and start selling tacos?
No, they have to be licensed through the Board of Health.
So they have to come and get a permit and you have to okay wherever they are?
Exactly. If
Okay.
they're going to be a permanent one, it's a different process than if it's just a temporary food truck coming in for a one day, they would get a one-day license. We had at Marty's a while ago, I don't know if he's still there or not, we had the hot dog cart. He came through, went through all the process, Tom goes out and does an inspection, make sure everything's up to code and everything.
And that's generally, like you said, if it's more than one day, that's a different, like, you might permit it for like 90 days, for 30, whatever
Right,
it
it
is.
depends on how long they plan on. If a food truck's gonna be coming multiple times, it's probably better and more cost-effective if they come and just get licensed for the year with us. You know, if you have a reoccurring food truck coming, it'd be better if they come and get a one-year license. It's gonna be more cost-effective than every time they're coming in getting a
And
one-day.
who should we say you said the responsibility falls on the food truck
It does
owner?
fall on them, yes.
So who should they contact?
The Board of Health.
Board of Health, okay. Okay,
All right, thanks, Jen.
Thank you.
I'll make sure to get that
Any further
information.
questions for the applicant or the Board of Health? Hearing none, Chair will entertain a motion to grant the request.
Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna move that we grant outdoor entertainment licenses to Nichols College for the following days and times. Friday, April 17th, 8 to 11 p.m. Thursday, April 30th, 12 to 5 p.m. Friday, May 1st, 10 a.m. to midnight. And Thursday, May 7th, from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further questions for the applicant? Of course, this is all, I mean, they're good about it, but pending, if public safety has an issue, they'll come before
Not
us.
worried about it.
All right. All in favor, state aye.
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 Unanimous. Lynn?
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you, Lynn.
I just noticed, it's not on the agenda, but at this point, we usually have a category of anybody wishing to speak about an issue that's not on the agenda, that does not require a vote of the board, has a chance to come forward.
My friend Mike Braniff.
Mike Braniff.
Hi, I'm Mike Braniff. Haven't been here for a while. Good to be back, but not tonight. I'm here to say a few words about the ongoing abomination at Village Cemetery. I'm addressing you because you guys wanted to be the cemetery committee. The buck stops with you. This is on your head. We fought for 10 years or more to get a national registered district on Dudley Hill, and prior to my board, the efforts went back to 1985 or so. And we finally got it done. And you people have authorized the cutting the heart out of the northern end of the historic district by savaging these old trees. I don't want to hear you didn't know about it. If you didn't know about it, you were incompetent. If you knew about it and let it go forward, you were incompetent. I don't know what's going to be done to make this whole, but something will have to be done. You have stabbed in the back the people of Dudley from past, present, and future. Your historic commission, who has always done an honest job to try and stick up for our historical interests. I'm disgusted with all of you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for the compliments, Michael. We don't necessarily know.
Shut up.
We don't necessarily, thanks for your, for your courtesy too, Michael. We listened to you.
Up
So-
yours.
All right, I'm just
You know
gonna,
what? Yeah, hold it. Get to a second.
well, I don't wanna have a tit for
It'd be
tat.
nice if somebody here,
I
all
don't,
right, had the class and spelled class with a C and not a K. Oh, thanks, Michael, very much. Could we have the highway commissioner come up and respond and tell us if he has any knowledge of what Michael's talking about?
Yeah, he's on medical leave right now.
He's what?
He's on medical leave.
Well,
tonight.
can you tell us?
well, I wanna touch on it first. I received a
You know,
email,
Sully?
a little bit. I received an email from Mr. Bazinet, and I immediately went out today and took a look at it, and I responded to Mr. Bazinet, and I talked to Mr. Ruda. So, yes, we are the highway commissioners, yes, we are the cemetery commissioners, and yes, the buck stops here. But at this point, I know Mr. Ruda had a chance to do a little bit of information gathering, and I'm not sure how much he wants to, how far he wants to go down the road, but I'm gonna turn it over to Jonathan for a minute, and we can update what happened after the action that had taken place. Mr. Ruda.
Mr. Chairman, first I'd like to ask if, have I spoken to Mr. Bazinet this morning? He certainly was upset, but we sat down and had a reasonable conversation, and to address the issue, I'm going to propose that we have a separate meeting to address some of the issues that the Historical Commission has identified, and I agree are issues in our village cemetery. The manner in which the trees were cut certainly upset the Historical Commission. Mr. Braniff is right, the buck stops here, it stops with me. So to the extent I knew about trimming going on to address roots that were growing into the walls and the sidewalk, I'm happy to fall on my sword for that. But the finished product was certainly not something that we all expected, and I think it does need to be addressed. So I'd suggest we do that in a separate meeting.
Who did the work? Did we do the work, Mr. Chairman, or was it an
I
outsourced?
believe a private tree company did it, as part of our ongoing tree
Okay.
trimming.
So, I know we were talking about doing a separate meeting, but what they see now is not the way it's gonna be into perpetuity, but I think the product as it stands now is what probably is generated.
It's clearly what's generated. And that the policymakers would have I do take exception with saying that you've authorized it. The policymakers have absolutely nothing to do with what limbs are gonna be cut as part of an ongoing mitigation.
Should we?
Nor should you process, so the buck stops with me, not the board. We'll address it, and we'll do whatever we can to remedy the situation. We can't undo it, but we can certainly work towards some sort of solution.
Okay.
You
Mr.
know,
Massey. Well, Mr.
Stephen.
Massey, hang on. John?
Just one, when did this happen? Is it recent, or is it?
Last week.
Last week,
Okay.
end of last week, maybe.
All right.
Well,
Yeah, I just take exception to Michael's rudeness. I understand he's angry, but for him to call us incompetent for something for which we did not know, nor would we normally know about which limbs were cut in a cemetery, was inappropriate, plain and simple. And I'm sorry he feels that way, but that's his problem at this point. The fact is that if something was done that we should have known about or should know about, then I would appreciate an update before an irate citizen on the Historical Commission comes in and complains like that. I didn't know anything about it, and that's, if he wants to say incompetence, God bless him.
That was the, like I said, I received an email. I was unaware. I received an email. I went out today. It's a very shocking and sobering sight when you come around. And I immediately called the administrator, and at that point, he had already spoken to Mr. Bazinet. And like I said, he was in a full information gathering mode. And, you know, I didn't appreciate all the things that were said before too, but I'm willing to almost give a mulligan to Mr. Braniff for the time he's donated to the town. The emotions are definitely running high, and to be fair, he and others probably could have came in and spoken even stronger language. Would have forced us to probably turn the audio off for a brief period of time, but yeah, it's not. The easy answer is we didn't know. We didn't authorize it in a direct manner. It's not probably a fair answer to some people, but I just ask people to please trust the process. Give us a chance. Let Mr. Ruda do his job that he's hired to do, to continue his information gathering, and as John Massey likes to state, to assume positive intent. This was not done maliciously. This was not done behind someone's back. It wasn't done to stab figuratively into the heart of what was done. I can't put words to it, I guess. Mr. Massey.
No, well said, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, and some positive intent. I mean, like I said, we have a strong town administrator who makes sure this stuff gets done, and I trust Jonathan will find a solution to this 100%. I've seen Michael's my friend. I've supported him on things that he's really been excited about, you know, the historical document preservation, and I've stood for that. So I think, you know, when we see stuff like this, you know, our names are next to it, we have to take it, right? I mean, even though, you know, that was hard to see, hard to hear, I think we'll move forward, Mr. Chairman.
Al?
Is this the property that's right by Shepherd Hill near the golf course area?
The cemetery.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Just clarifying
Yep.
where I am. Okay.
Jay, you good?
I, for one now, will take a ride out there and take a look at it.
Wait till daylight.
Yeah. Thanks, Sully.
Gary?
I don't want to add anything to we're going to talk about it next meeting. We'll address it then.
Okay, I'll go take a look at it.
I haven't even seen it, so I
Okay.
learned about it today.
Next up, 8, public hearing, change or alteration of premise, J&S Blue Inc., DBA Cindy's Pub, 6 Chase Ave. I don't have a notice to read, or do I? Oh, yes, I do. Board of Selectmen will hold a public hearing on Monday, February 24th, 2020, at 6:35. That's just an estimate, Sherry. At the Dudley, that's just because that's when we open. At the Dudley Municipal Complex, 71 West Main, Dudley, Mass., in room 321A, Veterans Hall. Purpose of this hearing to act on the application, change of alteration of premise for J&J Blue Inc., DBA Cindy's Pub, located 6 Chase Ave, Dudley, Mass. Petitioner requesting to alter the premise for a 150-foot by 40-foot horseshoe pit. Anyone wishing to be heard on this matter should appear at the date and time specified or submit concerns in writing. Declare the public hearing open at 7:40, and I invite the applicant to come forward. Mr. Rudy, you want to touch on it briefly while the applicant comes forward?
Mr. Chairman, I think that there was initially a request and we sent it back. Is that how I remember? Did you initially put in for an application for a horseshoe pit and then we asked to come back for something? What am I thinking of? Well, I'll defer to Michelle then. I thought that was the same issue.
Not that I'm aware of. No, she just, they want to alter the premises to have leagues and social gatherings out near the horseshoe pit that exists right now.
Right.
All right, I'll open it up. Sherry can identify herself, she's been here before, and then she can state her application.
So I'm Sherry Singh from Cindy's Car in Dudley. Just looking to amend my license so I can, during the times that I do have volleyball or horseshoes, I can let them bring their beverage outside. Right now, I have the license outside that is only covered by the 16 by 20 deck. It is on the side of the building, like it's fenced in on the side to cross street, and it's not near the road. It's like the furthest from the road at the back of the property, so they would come out and it's right there. So it would be the time that I have like, horseshoe league or cornhole league, something of that nature. So it wouldn't be just like any old time. It's just during that time. But like now, people say, oh, can I bring my drink outside? And I'm like, no, you can't, only on the deck. So I don't want to go about it in the wrong way. So that's why I'm looking to amend it.
So there's no like, protected being a strong word, but like there's no walkway that's fenced that gets to this location. They'd have to walk through the parking lot
Yes.
if you to get to it.
Yes.
So I'll defer to the police chief in a minute, but my first question would be, how do we ascertain that someone's not underage or even of age, just kind of does a U-turn out of their car and brings it into the area as if they bought it from inside?
Right. Well, my husband's always there and he plays in the league, so there'd be an employee outside at the time of the horseshoe league or volleyball league. Good question. You have camera out there as well.
Okay, I'm just gonna, police chief's gonna come up for a moment, and then we'll take the board
I
comments.
guess just any type of, is there any type of like snow fencing or anything else that's enclosing the area that you have in mind?
I don't have, I'm willing to put up like some snow fencing, like temporary fencing. I like looked up the pricing in case that came up, which would be like, it's about $30 for 100 feet. It's like 4 by 100. I'm guessing I need, just like 2 rolls of it, just so I would put it up during like, seasonally, so that way when it does like snow and so forth, and I push snow, because I want to, like one year we had a lot of snow, so we had to have like snow removal. So now we try to like push it way up, like where the back of the parking lot. So if I had like a permanent fence, it would be cut down on parking and so forth. So I would, it need be put that up.
So is that volleyball area enclosed that you're talking about right now? Is that wide open? Like the area that we have highlighted?
It's wide open.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, Mr. Chairman, they haven't really had any issues with their outdoor deck or anything like that, so I think if there was, if any consideration, I think something like that, just to kind of control the movement from the parking lot directly into there, because again, you get the concern about underage people, but then you also get the concern about if people can freely move about the parking lot and their cars are right there, they're just gonna go over to the car and grab a beer and walk it back over or something like that, and that'll impact their business as well. So I think anything that just can kind of contain it to a given area, even with some kind of temporary fencing that they can put up seasonally up and down, I think should be okay.
Paul?
Yeah, the area is not licensed, so, and I love short answers. So, right now, is the parking lot licensed for people to consume alcohol?
No.
I think it's only the deck.
I know the answer sometime. All right. Will the volleyball, horseshoe, whatever area, will that be licensed for people to have open containers of alcohol? My question is very carefully worded. Open containers of alcohol.
Depends if we vote for it or not.
Huh?
We'd have to allow it. That's what she's here
You'd
for.
have to go through the license and have the request to expand to that particular area. But to get to that area, they're gonna have to go through the parking lot. So my question is, if the parking lot is not licensed, and they're gonna have to go through the parking lot to get to this new area, do both areas need to be licensed in terms of having open containers of alcohol?
The only outdoor license that I can recall, at least off the top of my head, that we had at one point was for Rainbow Gardens, and that didn't include.
That was an enclosed patio.
No. They actually used to have.
Oh, on Rainbow. I'm sorry,
used to
Rainbow.
have horseshoe pits and everything out there, And so I think the license had said grounds, I think that was the term on it. So that's, I believe that was the only restriction for outside, because it had, building and grounds. So now, I think the board has made some revisions where they've restricted the area to, like, again, outside patios or enclosed areas or what have you. I think with the way you could word your license is grounds or immediate access to an enclosed area. I think we cover that.
Yeah, well, it's not quite that easy. So my only concern is I don't want these folks to spend the money to build this area, which I think is a good idea, by the way. Well, if they want to spend the money ahead of time, that won't be a factor in me voting in terms of whether or not I would expand the license to include the parking area and this area. So I just think that they need to know that they may want to do the horse before the cart. And that is, in terms of licensing, before you spend the money to put this recreational area in.
All right. So the recreational area, we do recreation out there already. I have the horseshoe pits and I have the volleyball court. There is a fence as soon as there's two doors that one we just use for in and out. We could, block that off because there's already a permanent fence there. They could use that door, either door really, to go out. And then we put up the temporary fencing. They would kind of be restricted to that area. I know what you're saying, do we have to license both? But I would want them to not be in the parking lot anyway. So if we put up the temporary fencing and maybe put some signage like no alcohol behind, beyond this point or so forth, there wouldn't be a lot of money spent.
But there will be a problem if they're going to be able to, number one, if they're going to be able to drink and you put a fence around it, and if you do allow it for volleyball, remember, volleyball players will go over the lines of the volleyball court to dive.
Right.
So that fence has got to be far enough back they can do that. And then the only question is, do you want to allow people to drink have open containers of alcohol at that location around the volleyball court, whether it's near the parking lot or on the other side? And if you do, in my opinion, and only my opinion, you're gonna have to work something out to enable people to carry that alcohol across an area that's not permitted. And I just want you to know that, I think, and if I'm wrong, I'll gladly be the first to be corrected.
No, that was my first question. How are they gonna get there from point A to point B?
Yep.
Mr. Massey?
So what's a good remedy to that? Is that amending the license request to make like a walkway that they could fence off during these events to get there and license that? I'm trying to, I see your point. I
don't have the answer, but I think that if the chief ultimately wants to support it, then he's gonna have to act on our behalf and trying to come up with a good solution.
I was just trying to get a copy of
Yeah, Chief.
Oh, here's a nice copy.
Oh, there's the map.
Mr. Chairman?
I should have brought out a copy.
Oh, thank you.
So if we were to do the license as grounds, that would mean someone could drink anywhere, an open
property.
container on the property.
No,
So-
I think, sorry, Carrie, I think what she's looking for is that area, and then she's indicated they're willing to fence that, at least temporarily fence that. It wouldn't be the whole grounds, it'd be that 140 by,
I understand, I just wouldn't want a license where someone's standing along Chase Ave by the
no.
Yeah, me either.
clothing donation.
You know what I mean?
bin.
Like, I don't. Yeah,
And
I know what
the
you're
other
saying.
the other thing I wouldn't want is someone coming from outside into the volleyball court where it isn't sealed somehow. You know what I mean?
Passing
Coming and
beers to
going,
people.
passing beers, you don't know how old they are.
going out to the car.
I want you to come before us for good things, not for bad things. I just see bad things happening. I just wanna, I wanna get focus on what we're doing.
The other concern,
Also,
and we all, I believe, know this, Jay, you might not have been on board when we did all of these, but
you know.
They
like
can't afford another violation.
Nope.
Correct.
They have a violation of their liquor license.
That's why,
They're losing it.
that's why when I said at the beginning, she was in here before
Block it off
talking
for that
about
second note,
this.
because there's already a little.
They're losing the
Send her-
license
you
if
sent her
there's
out.
another violation.
So you would
I
go
just think they
out
might be
this
setting
way
themselves
only,
up for violation.
but out
She needs
back.
to amend it
I don't think it's gonna be enforceable. So
So-
that's my
That's
opinion.
why I'm
This is not
trying to
like
get,
hours a day, like, this is
what
like,
kind of fencing
know
are
what
we
I
gonna
mean?
have? Is it gonna be a permanent thing
but I
or
wanna
something
let them
someone
just
can
like
just
bring their
step
beer
over?
out now and
You're
get
gonna have a
for that,
19-year-old
you know
kid
what I mean?
walking in here playing horseshoes. No offense, Al.
Alright, none taken.
So what they, I guess from just, I just went over it quickly with the owner here. So I think what you have is that there are two doors entering the business, it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're looking at, there's the main door, and then there's another door just to the right of it as you're going through. So what she's explaining is that they would use that second door and be able to cordon that off, that goes outside to the area. So that's where your fencing would then be installed and then close that area off.
I suppose you'd have to ask the fire chief that, how would that affect their emergency egress if they got it dedicated to get to the volleyball court? You know what I'm saying? That door's gotta be, there's gotta be a code reason that door's there, right?
I think it's
The
just
second one she's talking about.
been there forever, cause and it says this, you know, like, that doesn't say exit over it, like, that's not like the main exit door.
Yeah, but it must be using it, just in case there was God forbid there was an emergency and you had to get everybody out quick. Right. I'm just saying,
Yeah, and I have deck doors also that are, and an exit off the deck that I had to put in at a later date. So there's plenty of exits. And it's temporary fencing, it's 4 feet high. If there was like a fire on the volleyball court,
Yeah, when you say, no, I'm talking about interior, if someone had to get out.
oh, but they would still just
You
go,
say
if
block,
they
you're
were
not gonna-
in,
You say block, you're not gonna block that door.
no,
You're gonna
no,
use it.
no.
No, I think what you have, Mr. Chairman, is you have two doors that are fairly close to one another.
Thank you.
So the main door.
Super close.
The main door would be left open coming in off the parking lot, and a fencing of some sort would be set up from, like, that door over towards the pit. So people would still be able to get out both doors. You just, if you were going out to the area where this is gonna be, you'd be in that enclosed section, walking out into the enclosed section. No different than if you were going out onto the deck.
Like onto the deck, yeah.
Something like that.
Same
That's what I
thing.
could see.
So, Mr. Administrator, would a prudent course of action, continue the public hearing? Let's get some more firm means of crowd control and alleviate the question about access and,
Yeah, I think if we continue the hearing and give the opportunity for the applicant to speak both with the police chief offline
and fire.
and the fire, and make sure that that they're satisfied that the requirements are met, we'll take another shot at it.
Chief, you good with that?
So what would happen, like, would you come down there? Like, when I built the
The
deck,
chief- yeah, the chief and the-
at the time, he came down and I showed him where it was gonna be and so forth, so we would meet down there.
In my opinion, to do it, because you're gonna use them.
Right, yeah, they have
Who?
to talk to the building inspector too, just in case.
Yeah, he's been there plenty of times.
Just
like, he'll
come back
know.
with something a little more detailed where it shows the actual screening.
Public hearing, so.
We're gonna continue it, have them come back after they meet with
You
the,
don't wanna have anybody, if they have
yeah,
questions.
oh no, I haven't
yet?
continued it yet, I'm just saying,
Okay.
no, I said a course of action would be to continue. And then meet with the two chiefs, and if necessary, building, whoever needs to be notified in the town, and come back with a slightly more detailed plan.
It could be around any time.
We'll carry it over to the next meeting. Give her a couple weeks to work.
During, like, they're cleaning,
I'm not gonna,
always
I'm
Friday morning.
not gonna take a vote to continue yet. Is anybody here that wanted to speak on it?
Bright light.
He turned his light on.
So, apparently not. So at this time, Chair will entertain a motion to continue the public hearing.
You really can't make a motion during a public.
You gotta close it.
No, you can't close
Oh, we
it.
continue though? We're
Yeah, you
continue?
can take a motion to continue.
Not during the public.
We can't close it.
What you can do is you can ask for unanimous consent that we continue it and then come up with a date.
Thanks, Chief.
It's okay.
So without objection, we will continue to the next public meeting that we have,
Of the board?
yeah, of this public hearing application,
It'll be continued at 3/9, Mr. Chairman.
right, on 3/9,
March 9th, Jerry?
Yeah.
unless notified beforehand by public safety that they have not been able to make a determination at that point, we'll just
We'll open it.
we'll open it up, open and continue it again.
Yeah.
So we'll move it to the next meeting after you meet with these guys.
Okay.
And you can figure out exactly what, alleviate the concern of access, alleviate the concern of attainment,
Mm-hmm.
and then as long
They
as
couldn't like decide and be like, okay, you know, come down and be like, oh, that's not gonna work out,
Yes.
you know?
Like,
Right.
if you say, I want to put a fence here, and the police chief says, no, it should be here. Or if you say, I want
Right.
this high, he says, no, I want that high. And if fire determines that it may be impacting your egress, you know what I'm saying, just as long as they come back and say, all good. And
We're all
if
good,
building-
and then
if
March
building-
9th we'll meet again,
Yes.
and they'll say, yeah,
Best way to
we're
go.
good to go.
Right, and I would definitely touch base with building just in case.
So just come to the office at some point when you're ready to go, just come see Michelle again, and we'll
We'll
make
set
sure
it
you
up.
get everything you need.
So you want to make a statement to enter into the minute, let the minutes reflect that the board unanimously agreed to do that?
Yeah, we're just gonna make sure she's all set with, you're good with that?
Yep, so I'll be back March 9th.
Yeah, just stay in touch
Okay,
with the
and
office.
I'll get in touch with them. I'm always like there in the mornings anyway and stuff, like when they would be working.
Because if there's a problem that you guys can't come to an agreement on what they request, you know, it may be postponed again, but it should be.
Oh, yeah, no, I'll be fine. I'll do
Alright.
whatever they want me to do.
So in the absence of any more questions, unanimous consent to reconvene this public hearing at our next regularly scheduled meeting of March 9th, 6:35 PM as a benchmark starting time.
All right.
Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, chiefs. Whew. I'm out of here. You guys close it up. Next up, second public hearing on a secondhand vehicles. The Board of Selectmen will hold a public hearing on Monday, February 24th, 2020 at 6:45 PM at Dudley Municipal Complex, 71 West Main Street, Dudley, Mass. in the Veterans Memorial Hall, 321A. Purpose of this hearing, to act on an application for a Class 2 secondhand motor vehicle license for Sam Nurkanovi, DBA Nurkanovi Auto Sales, located 65 Schofield Ave, Dudley, Mass. Anyone wishing to be heard at this should appear at this date and time specified or submit their concerns in writing. Open the meeting at 7:57. Invite the applicants to come up, but at this time I'll ask the administrator if you want to touch on it.
He's not here?
Oh, he's not here? I thought that was these guys.
Is
Oh.
Zosha still here? Zosha and Sam?
Oh, your butters?
So, well, she can't act on it, she's not the applicant.
He's not here. I notified him.
He should be here for that, Mr.
It's
Chairman.
6:45. He has to be here.
Yeah.
What's the matter?
He's not
He's
here.
here.
Who is it?
The applicant.
Sam is not here, Zosha? Please come up to the microphone so I for one can hear her.
She's not the applicant.
Continue this one too, Mr.
Zosha,
Chairman.
where is Sam?
Close it and continue it.
All right,
What's going on? I hope they
The
have
butters
something
here.
coming out.
no, because they can't talk anything.
Have you opened the public hearing yet?
Yes. I mean,
Can I take over? I
no,
cannot.
you're not the applicant. I mean, I can, the butters can come up and speak, but there's nothing to act on. So I guess we'll have to do a similar action, just ask the board for unanimous consent to
You want to
continue.
hear from them so they don't
I
have
asked
to
him, the guy
return?
said no.
No?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Continue it, right?
Yeah, well,
So is the chair asking for unanimous
yeah,
consent
to the next meeting,
to continue to our next public meeting?
March 9th.
March 9th at 6:45 PM
Ugh.
again.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Sorry.
Thank you, Zosha.
And to the abutters out of here, the actual process itself, if you want to contact the office, I mean, they can tell you a little bit background information, how we do it.
To the microphone.
Right.
Yeah, they just transfer, well, yeah. Spaces. Right, yeah, the parking, but they're not increasing. But yeah, you guys are welcome to come back, stay in touch with the office, but it should be on the 9th. Yep, thank you. Why don't you come on up for a sec? Yep.
Hello, my name's Robert Latour. I live across at 64 Schofield Ave, and I also have the parcel at 66, which is directly across from where I live. Henry has been a resident, pretty much a resident there, a super businessman, clean, he always gentleman, always waved, perfect businessman. Right now, we're kind of concerned on the parking spaces, where the spaces are that he's turning over to that person, and where the parking spaces are where Henry is keeping for himself. They said there's a 15-lot space, and kind of concerned where the cars are gonna be. Right now, cars are parking on my front lawn, cars are pulling in his driveway, and it's kind of a concern. If he's gonna do business on his property, he should be doing business on his property. He should have parking spaces for his clients to pull in and be able to park and do business. I have nothing to say about the license transfer. That's fine. I'm not gonna take his livelihood away for selling cars there. I just don't wanna look out my yard. Maybe one day I wanna develop 66. Maybe I don't wanna look across the street and see a junkyard there. Henry's always maintained it well. He's always had decent cars out there. Nothing at all against Henry. It's just I don't wanna see it turn over to bad.
Right. Well, if we can provide you the sketch that they provided us that shows.
Where the parking spaces are.
Right, you can,
Okay.
Michelle can
Yep.
email that to you,
Yep.
or give you a copy.
I would like a copy of that.
Yeah, because that was from the first one. Give you an idea.
That was just basically my concern. Like, we're not here to try to take the guy's license away. We know he has to make a livelihood. Like I said in the past, previously, that Henry has been a gentleman, never a sloppy house.
Right.
And it's changed hands, and I see different things going on, and we just don't want to let it get out of hand.
No, I agree. I mean, speaking as
You
a,
give him an inch, and then all of a sudden, because he's got a Ram truck over there, I don't want to see him coming in all kinds of hours of the night with Ram trucks, parking cars in there.
yeah, he
And
won't be able to, because it's gonna be restricted, and that secondhand license.
That's kind of just like what we're here to listen to, and, like I said,
Well,
the
one
guy-
of the things that we want to do, is we want to point out that Henry and Zosha
Mhm.
still will own the property.
I understand. I
Transfer of any
know
property.
everything that's going on over there. Henry and I are very close friends, so should also.
Okay.
There is nothing against them. I understand they own the property. They're leased to purchase. I know everything that's going on here. And like I said, I'm not trying to take his license away and his livelihood. We just want to kind of maintain it to keep the appearance of what it was when Henry was there.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've known Henry
No, I've
Even
known
as
him
a-
ever since he's been here, and I'll tell you what,
30 years.
hats off to the gentleman.
Yep.
And I'm dead serious.
He is a gentleman.
I've known him 30 years.
Thank you.
Public, but he is.
Oh, he is. All right, so we're gonna come to the back the 9th, unless you hear differently, or you just stay in touch.
We'll stay in touch.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in.
That was an easy one. Old business. New business. Paul Wheelock presenting on behalf of the Dudley Conservation Land Trust, and Jen Canoia, Chair of the Board of Health Commission for the Dudley Conservation Land Trust, Board of Health, Dudley Grange Hughes Highway Facility and Yard for Earth Day, Saturday, April 25th, 2020. As an aside, I spoke to the superintendent, who is not here tonight, and he is 100% in agreement that you folks can use the Highway Department facility, which is the first step in can we use it?
Yes, well, you
Paul.
know, just to let you know, this is the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, so, you know, we're trying to get together. There's a collaborative effort between the Land Trust, the Grange, and the Board of Health to try and do something a little bit special this year. So, you know, we thought that the Highway Department would be the best place to do it, because people are gonna be coming in, picking up bags, gloves and stuff from the Board of Health, so we're gonna try and round up a bunch of vendors to talk about conservation issues, okay?
Right.
What are some of the things that people can do this year? Not only what we've done in the past, but if there's new things, and how do people get in touch? Is there something on the town webpage where they can volunteer and become active?
Let me start. I'm Jen Canoia, Chairman of the Board of Health. I was coming to get permission before we start advertising anything. I wanted to be sure that we could utilize. I've sat down with Vinnie. We've had lengthy discussions back and forth about Earth Day and what we're planning on doing. Just to give you an idea, we're looking to have Earth Day on Saturday, April 25th from 8 a.m. till 12 noon down at the Highway Barn. It is the 50th anniversary, so we're looking to do some special things as well, try to make it a little bit bigger, reaching out to more people looking for more volunteers. And we also are incorporating our rabies clinic. At the same time, we will be having Second Chance Animal Shelter down with their mobile van between the hours of 10:30 and 1:30. We've also discussed this. They'll be there to do our rabies vaccines as well. And I'm hoping to maybe get the mobile van with some adoption animals out there too, to kind of make a bigger event and entice people, come pick up a
Yeah,
bag
that's
of
a draw.
trash and come look at some cute puppies and stuff.
That's great.
Yeah,
So.
very good. Board members, questions? John?
Yeah, no, I support this 100%. You guys are always prepared for when this comes up every year, and I'd love for this to happen.
I'm very happy that
Yeah,
we're looking to make it a
collaboration
much
between
bigger
the,
event.
I love it.
Yes, I haven't spoke with Jen yet, but did you ask Vinnie if we could use the bathrooms inside?
Yes.
So I have a key
We are
for
good
the-
at that.
Jen will be all over it. She'll know.
Yes.
I have a key for the highway barn, so
Yep.
it's okay if we use the bathrooms.
Well, let's get this ball rolling,
Okay, Paul.
and I'm gonna move that the Board of Selectmen vote to approve the request by the Dudley Conservation Land Trust and the Board of Health and the Dudley Grange to hold Earth Day activities on Saturday, April 25th, 2020, at the Highway Barn.
Before I call for a second, I just want to make sure all other board members had their questions and concerns answered. Mr. Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As someone that's been at these events quite a bit over the years, I'd love to see some more of the townspeople and especially people on the boards at these events too, helping out.
I would appreciate it. Will you be joining your wife this year?
Yeah.
Like I have a choice.
Thank you. Look forward to seeing you.
Thank you.
Makes up for Treehouse and Rico's.
Treehouse.
Oh, it's a Saturday?
Anything else you'd like to
That's the
add?
line of the night right there.
Anybody else, Gary?
Besides approving this, what else do you need or want from us? Is there anything else we can do to help make this as good as possible?
I would love if you can get the word out, try to get volunteers, have them contact the Board of Health. We will be, like I said, I was waiting for the approval. We're going to put it on the websites. We're going to get flyers out. We'll get it in the paper. We're going to put it in the schools. Michelle knows everything that's going on with it. We just would like to really get out there and make it a big celebration this year. It is the 50th anniversary. Last year was a really good Earth Day, better than in the past, and we're just hoping to continually make it bigger and better.
Yeah, just to say that, we're trying to round up like a bunch of vendors, like we're gonna try and get, the Land Trust is gonna be there, the French River Connection, et cetera, et cetera. But if anybody knows anybody that, is involved with solar energy or wind power, or even somebody that just has an electric car, they could come down, spend a few hours down there, talk to people about electric cars and electric vehicles, stuff like that, we would appreciate,
Mr. Zakowski would love to help with that.
Student rep Al.
Mr. Zakowski would love to help with that, Paul.
He's got to
Oh,
work.
would he?
He's got a way of finding
He meant-
refrigerators on the side of the road.
I can see if we can get the NHS involved and Stuco and Triumph, see if we can get some volunteer hours and
That's a
volunteers
great
down
idea,
there.
Al.
That would be wonderful, because we do send out every year, but I'm sure they have tons of things going on. But we're hoping to get it out early this
Yeah,
year, and
we can
absolutely.
definitely
Thank
find
you.
out. Yeah. Great.
Any further questions? I'll call for a second to Paul's motion.
Second.
Multiple seconds. Any further questions or concerns? Hearing none. All in favor to grant the request, state aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Good luck, folks.
Thanks,
Thank you.
guys. Good to see you.
We already did Dudley Little League, unless somebody wants to revisit the vote to make it unanimous. Good with that, Jay. Thank you. Board member comments. Mr. Joseph.
Oh, what if I did?
Yeah, we weren't here to...
Doesn't like the Little League.
Paul.
I'm good.
Jay.
Thanks everyone that showed up for the
Thanks.
the spaghetti dinner at Church for the Scouts. It was quite a turnout, so thank you all.
Mr. Massey.
I have nothing new tonight, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Sigenovich.
George, could I ask you a question during my comments? I try to get everybody evenly.
It's comments.
I'll give you an answer. It may not be the right one, but I'll give you one.
I've had a number of people ask me, and I know I'm not the person to talk to, and I figure you are, but I want to get the right thing to say to the folks. If someone has a question about their water or sewer bill, the amount, the gallons, anything about it, who should they be, and I might know this, but I just want to make sure everyone else does.
Call our office, 949-8007. We have Jen Canoyer, our secretary there. Also, we could have somebody else that can assist. So they can come into the town hall if they want also.
Okay, so they could either call, come here
Yep.
with questions, concerns, anything?
I was gonna come up anyway, but I might as well, this is kind of a related thing. The last couple of weeks, the water and sewer departments together have been going out and replacing water meters. We had a bulk of meters come in with radio readers, saved us a lot of money by getting it in bulk, and we've now been going out about 12 a day. Our secretary's been sending out notices and appointments, they've been tagging houses. This is just to put the new systems in place and also revamp the old systems, and I'm including the meters themselves, because they're losing their effectiveness. So this is a dual effort to do everything at once. So if you get tags, we appreciate you call the office, set up an appointment. And by doing this, they're also checking the plumbing in the houses. A lot of these people who are having issues at the last minute with faulty shutoffs, where they can't shut the water off, their houses are flooding. The water department and the sewer department are in there, and they're also helping them understand what problems they may have in the future and what to correct, or if there's any other issues that are going on with their plumbing. So it's also helping them there. And a lot of people are bringing up bills, things like that. This system is instrumental in helping to identify problems in history on every single house, what might help lead to where you might have a problem with a leak or whatever, or a bill. So.
Excellent.
Is that your departmental correspondence too?
What's that?
Is that your departmental?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Might as well do it now.
See, George, good call.
Student rep.
So hello, everybody. We have a Wizards fundraiser. I have a few flyers, actually. We can pass that down. That would be lovely. On March 11th, it's a combination between the Booster Club and the PTO. Their general admission is $12, $15 at the door. Reserved is $20, and courtside is $35. Fantasy got 3rd in Ohio, and T-Tones and Illusion got 4th in Ohio, which is really good. Because when you go all the way out there, it's really weird how they judge, but they just go really hardcore on outsiders, and they did really well. Winter sports are coming to a close. Our spring sports are coming up. March 2nd is team orientation. Our term 3 progress reports are right around the corner. Winter percussion got 4th out of 5 at Dartmouth on Saturday with a score of 72.75. March 26th is our learning showcase. 5:30 is the 8th grade course selection. 6 to 8 is meet the teachers, and 6:30 to 8 is the college fair, and there's a 5:30 college planning seminar thing. And the winter percussion and guard home show is March 22nd at noon. Tickets are $5 for students and $8 for adults. And on March 21st, there's a John Pair 3 versus 3 basketball tournament. And I registered to vote last week.
Oh!
Congratulations. Thank you.
Greatest country in the world.
Coming to.
Greatest country in the world.
How easy was it to register to vote, Al?
It's not that hard at all.
You do it right online, right?
Yeah.
Like the TV
All you-
commercial when the lady's out there with her cell phone?
Yeah.
All you kids on your phones?
I actually did it in physics class. Probably supposed to be paying attention, but I registered to vote.
Whoa, 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 we didn't want to hear that.
-1 demerits.
Yeah. So it's a quarter grade
It's a
point.
noble cause. It's fine. Everything's okay.
Excellent, Al.
Thanks,
Accept the student report as read. Departmental communications, we just heard from water and sewer. Fire and EMS, good? Police? He left. He's good. Without objection, Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
No,
Paul, go ahead.
Chair will entertain a motion.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna move that we adjourn into Executive session under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, subsection 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigation process, position of the public body, which is the Board of Selectmen, and the chair so declares. We don't have to include what's after that.
Second.
Yeah, but not to reconvene an open
And not,
session.
yeah, not to reconvene in public session tonight.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Roll call vote.
Paul Joseph, aye?
Jay Johnson, aye.
Stephen Sullivan, aye.
John Marcy, aye.
Terry Siganovich, aye.
Good evening, everyone. Have a unanimous.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Have a
Have a unanimous night.
have a safe night.
Right.